Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Emily walked, wiping away her tears, the pouring rain helping to hide the pain on her cheeks. It was as if life had ended, cut off forever after hearing those words. That was less than an hour ago. "I'm not getting married on the second floor of his house." "Go to the interruption, do," said in a cold tone in response to her confession lover. "And I'm not confused. You said that we are serious. We're dating," Emily objected. "Well, yeah, dating to have a good time. What did you think? Then why did you ask if I'd marry you if you offered to be your wife?" "You always take the words of the average guy as the ultimate truth," he asked with a chuckle. "What am I supposed to do now?" The girl was torn, looking into the cheeky piggy eyes of her favorite Bill. "I told you to get rid of it. I'll give you the money. Do you realize that I may never have children at all after this? What are you reproaching me with now? Children are the responsibility of the one who gives birth to them. I don't owe you anything at all." Emily looked in horror at the guy she had fallen in love with and said through her tears, "I don't recognize you." "Bill, what are you talking about? It was your suggestion that I not go to the drugstore in the middle of the night. What does that have to do with me? You're the one having the baby, not me. Why were you thinking with my head and not your own?" Hearing that made her even more torn. Bill pulled out his smartphone, not reacting to her tears in any way, and started watching something. After a minute, she heard a notification on her phone. "I've transferred the money. You can go to the best clinic. You have enough. There will be more left over. I'll check everything out." "Don't you feel sorry for that child at all? It's a human being. Bill, a tiny human being. It's an embryo now." How could her heart not freeze? Her eyes not become glassy? Emily lifted her eyes and looked at his face, realizing she was looking for a conscience in the unconscionable, and said, "I wish your mother had done that to you." Emily rushed away from Bill's house, away from the shards of her broken heart left in his house. Outside, the fall rain was pouring down. "I didn't have my umbrella with me, but that was better. No passerby would realize they were seeing tears." The day I met her came to mind. It was in the heat of summer. A friend invited her to a picnic, where Emily met Bill, tall, slender. He charmed her with his small black eyes. His gaze gave her unpleasant goosebumps all over her body. She would never have tried to get close to him. But her friend noticed that he was interested in her and persuaded her to talk to him. Bill turned out to be extremely kind and polite. After the picnic, he called his personal driver and asked to take Emily home. It was at that moment that she learned that he was the son of the local knitting factory owners. This family's enterprise was known to everyone in town. They paid good wages to all their employees, paid generous overtime, and gave extra days off. Every third citizen of the city wanted to work for this company. Even the janitor was paid twice as much as in any other place. Emily's mother worked as a cleaner, thinking how to tell everything. The girl froze at the intercom, hesitating to pick up the key. Her mother knew about her relationship with Bill and did not approve of it from the beginning, warning about possible consequences. She didn't believe it. It seemed serious to her. With a trembling hand, Emily opened the door to the entryway, pressed the elevator call button. Hearing her heart pounding in her ears, she knew her mother wouldn't pat her on the head for such a surprise. But there was nowhere else to go. Her father had died a long time ago. Her grandmother would have another heart attack from hearing this. In despair, Em burst into tears again. The elevator doors opened. In the elevator mirror, she saw her crying face and remembered that she had forgotten all about makeup. She took the makeup remover out of her purse and had to clean herself up quickly. Otherwise, her mother would ask her from the doorstep, "What's wrong?" The two-room apartment smelled pleasantly of borscht. Hi, you're up early. Did you have a fight with someone?" came Mom's voice from the kitchen. "We broke up," I heard my mother drop her spoon into her plate and stagger toward the hallway. "What happened? Tell me," she asked caringly, looking at her daughter. Unable to hold back any longer, Emily burst into tears. "You bastard," Mom shrieked after hearing her out. "He won't get away with it that easily." No. Em looked sadly at her flaring mom and said, "What can he do? You can't make him fall in love and get married. You can make him take care of the baby, though. All you have to do is sue for paternity, and that bastard will be in trouble. The baby hasn't been born yet. It will be, and that bastard's not going anywhere. I'm not going to let you, a first-year student, leave you with a baby in your arms. I'll go to his parents tomorrow and tell them everything. Let them influence their son," the mother said, and suggested, "Let's go to the kitchen, eat. Have you checked in with the gynecologist?" "Yes." "Good for you," Mom hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. "Don't worry, I won't let you get hurt, no matter what it costs me. I'll go look for a job tomorrow so I can get some maternity pay at least. You can hardly support me and the baby on your own. You're my gold. Find one if you can. Without education, without experience, It's a bit difficult, but we could really use an extra penny. Her mother couldn't sleep at night, imagining going to talk to Bill's parents tomorrow. It would be difficult for her, a simple cleaning woman, to threaten these influential and wealthy people, who were also her superiors. Will they listen to her? What will she live on if she is fired for this conversation? There is money, of course, but it will not last long. In the morning, she woke up earlier than usual and peeked into Emily's room. Her daughter was still asleep. The mother was determined to protect her and her future grandson or granddaughter. She put on a business suit, put on makeup, styled her short hair, and after eating a light breakfast, went to the bus stop. Her intuition told her that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. It was unlikely that Bill's parents, who had known about their son's pranks for years, would be a better character than he was. After all, there were rumors going around town about how one of the bum's girls had gone for an abortion until she got infertility because of it. The supervisor's office was on the second floor of the plant. The last time she had seen her father Bill was on March 8th, when he handed out envelopes with gift certificates to female employees at a cosmetics and perfume store. His wife Catherine was the plant's chief accountant. Rumor had it that she was the reason the company was thriving. Deciding it would be easier to get along with a woman, she approached Catherine. "Catherine Michael, good morning. My name is Grace. I would like to speak with you regarding your son," she said once she got to the right office. "Good morning. Grace, have a seat. Is he distracting the young female employees from their work again?" "No, the question is more personal. May I speak to you privately, mother to mother?" Hearing these words, the boss asked the other accountant to leave the office for half an hour. "This is about your son and my daughter Emily. She is pregnant with his child. Your son refuses to be a father and is demanding to get rid of the child. Did he pay for the abortion?" "Yes." "In that case, what's the problem?" "My daughter won't do that. It is a serious psychological and physiological trauma for a woman to give birth and raise a child alone. It would be a lesser trauma for her to have an abortion. From your point of view, my son won't take such a step as fatherhood. He has studies, a great future. After all, marriage to your daughter is definitely not in our plans." "You're willing to kill your grandson or granddaughter for your plans," Grace marveled. "Is human life worth nothing to you at all?" "I've had an abortion before, and as you can see, I even gave birth to a son. Yes, it was a hard thing to go through. But at least next time your daughter will think with her head." "You know what?" Grace became indignant. "If you won't hold your son accountable, he'll be held accountable by the courts by us." There was a knock on the office door. "I'm busy," the supervisor called out. "Even for your favorite son?" the young man asked, looking in. Seeing his mother, he uttered, "Hello, Grace Boris." "I come in," his mother told him. "Look, what are you being threatened with?" Bill's face turned cold in an instant. "I offered money. What's her problem with that? The idea of killing her own child doesn't suit not only her, but me as well. It's strange that you take it so lightly. The life of a born human being means nothing to you." "As you wish, you're right. But you will raise him yourself." "I wasn't planning on starting a family." I can imagine the headlines in the newspapers. "Millionaire's son marries cleaning lady's daughter." That would be a laugh. "You don't have to get married. We'll prove your paternity in court." And then the headlines in the papers will be even more interesting. Mother and son laughed. Bill said, "Let's say, what's next? Child support. So I'm a student. What would a quarter of my scholarship be? Less than 1,000. But the father will spend a lot on the DNA trial. You won't always be a student, will you? Like your mom said, you got a big future. You and your daughter don't have one. You won't get anything." Bill grinned smugly. Grace realized that she would not forgive the scoundrel who had done this to her daughter. She remembered the only person who could help. In a situation like this, for years she had lied that he had been a paratrooper and died. For many years she did not talk to him and did not even congratulate him on holidays. But he was true to his word all these years, provided for her and her daughter so that they did not need anything. Inside the envelopes with money he always wrote, "Remember, you and Emily can come to me at any time," passing a grinning Bill. The woman looked him in the eye and said, "Smile while you can. Everything comes to an end." Emily's father had run a criminal gang in the past, and most of the town and even the surrounding villages had heard about his dealings. The gangsters took away businesses, houses, and apartments they liked. As the ringleader, Jack did not shy away from anything, used threats, torture, blackmail. Sometimes he took some families to the forest and left them there. Even the police could not protect them from his men. Everyone who tried to catch the gang could not be found. Within a week, the town was living in fear, until Jack fell in love. It was just before Easter. Grace came out of church with her mom. That's where Jack spotted her. Recognizing that the girl was religious and decent, he drove up in his BM to meet her. Grace turned him down. "Are you crazy?" her friend shrieked when she heard what had happened. "That thug could bury all your loved ones alive, just to get your consent. Don't mess with him. He's dangerous. If I don't want to meet someone, I won't. Fool. This gang won't play games with you. Did you hear what they're doing?" A frightened Grace heeded her friend's advice. When Jack drove up a second time, she agreed to have dinner with him. For the first date, the gang leader chose the most elite restaurant in town. He behaved decently, didn't harass her. After dinner, he gave Grace a large bouquet of white roses and drove her home. "Good God, did you really get involved with this scumbag?" her mother asked anxiously, seeing from whose car her daughter had emerged with the bouquet. "I mean, the whole town is afraid of him. Why did you get involved with him?" "Exactly. He's a very dangerous man. And turning him down was a bad idea too. I don't want to lose you or get in big trouble." "Did he hit on you?" Emily asked. "No, oddly enough. Behaved decently for a thug," replied Grace. Rumors of Jack and Grace's relationship spread around town within a week. The congregation of the church where she went, using the words of the Apostle Paul as a disguise, discussed. What can righteousness have in common with lawlessness? The man provided her with a car and security, realizing that the lover was risking his life to meet him. When a month and a half later the gang leader suddenly appeared with Grace at the morning service, both the parishioners and the priest were frightened. However, from that moment on, Jack's rampage in the city was never heard of again. He began to develop a legal business and no longer threatened anyone. But retiring for the bandit does not mean that he will be left alone. The first time Grace was kidnapped was on her wedding day to Jack. Enemies of the groom snatched the bride from the house in a white dress, asking her mother to tell her future son-in-law that Grace will be returned in pieces if he does not return once taken by his gang 3-room apartment. Jack tracked down the kidnappers and killed each one. "But couldn't you just give people their property back?" screamed his rescued fiancée at him. "Why did you have to kill them? Because they won't stop at one apartment." "Believe me, darling, human greed has no limits," replied Jack. "In that case, I'll be kidnapped all the time." "Is that arrangement okay with you?" "Not all the time. People understand the language of power quickly. After a year, things will quiet down. I'll provide you with heavy security for that time." Hearing these words, Grace canceled the wedding. Then Jack kidnapped her and took her to a country house, telling her that she would not return home until she changed her mind. Grace agreed, realizing that it is better not to joke with him. 3 months into the marriage, she became pregnant. The unborn M was 5 weeks old when another attempt was made on her parents' life. Having survived the threat of miscarriage, Grace fled from Jack to another city, deciding that it would be safer. He, on the other hand, provided his wife with everything she needed through his men. Jack realized that the family is no more when his wife, returning with a child in her arms, through the court demanded a divorce. Jack had not expected such a turn. He had chosen a religious bride for a reason. It was known among the thugs that such a girl would be faithful and could not divorce according to God's law. But other thugs stole future wives from Protestant churches. Apparently, unlike Jack, they knew that the Orthodox were the most wayward. Apparently, the priest who refused to marry the gang leader, even at gunpoint, understood something. Her mother told Grace that the gang leader would bribe the judge or blackmail him into rejecting her demands, but her husband wouldn't do it. After the divorce proceedings, the ex walked up to her, gave her the keys to a 2-bedroom apartment and said, "This is M's and yours. I don't need your handouts," Grace replied. "Grace, this is not the time to show your pride. Accept it, please. There's a crisis in the country. I don't want you, our daughter and your mom, living in a 1-bedroom. You can't provide a nanny." You realize that realizing Jack was right, Grace took the keys. "Promise me something," Jack asked. "What do you want?" "Promise me you won't show up in our daughter's life. Disappear as if you never existed. She'll never get her life together if everyone knows about her gangster daddy." "Yeah, the whole town knows you are my wife. How are you going to hide it when I was pregnant and gave birth? We didn't live together. I'll say I got pregnant in another town by a trooper. It'll be safer for everyone. None of the thugs will infringe on the baby, and hopefully we'll be left alone. But I'll still help you. The mother of my child should not need anything. And if anything happens, remember, you can always come to me." Almost 19 years have passed since Jack said those words. In all that time, Grace had never once asked him for help. She had dealt with every difficulty on her own, only now. But you left her no choice. The ex-husband has accomplished a lot over the years. Standing in front of the 9-story building of his business center, Grace was about to enter when a familiar heavy voice called out behind her. Looking around, she saw a black Hummer in the parking lot. The driver's door opened and a tall, gray-haired man with bushy black eyebrows approached her. His dusky gaze was chillingly intimidating. She tried to say hello to Jack, but the words stuck in her throat. "Are you here by chance or on business?" the ex asked. Coming to her senses, Grace replied, "Business. I want to ask for help for M. She's in trouble." Asking what was wrong, Jack listened to her in silence and didn't seem to pay attention to Grace's pale face. "I'll try to help, but I can't promise anything. My wife will make a scene if she finds out I'm helping you. It's not like she doesn't know I have a daughter." "I understand, and I'd be glad if you could come up with something. There's no one else we can count on. Go home, don't worry. I won't let anyone treat my daughter like that." In the morning, I woke up before my alarm clock. It was 4 on the clock when the door to his room swung open and 2 men with guns, dressed as an assault team, ordered him to the floor. "Bill," one of them asked. The boy nodded, Handcuffing him, the strangers dragged him into the courtyard. "What am I accused of?" he asked, finding himself on the lawn next to his crying mother.
You abused the daughter of a very powerful man. Now he wants to do the same to you.
"Bill, is this true?" the mother asked in horror. "No, I have no idea who we're talking about. You've got me mixed up with someone else."
Hush, hush. There's no mistake. Bill just did the deed, and into the bushes a male voice piped in.
Bill started going over in his head all the girls he knew, trying to figure out which one might possess such intimidating familiarity. "Which one?" he wailed. "Who did I dump? Orlova." Hearing that name was the last thing he expected to hear. "Em doesn't have a father. He's dead," Bill said, bewildered. "You're the one who's going to die now, and your mom's going to watch it. I mean, she went along with killing her grandson easily, so she'll survive the death of her irresponsible son." "No, please, no," the mother screamed. Someone hit him and he lost consciousness. He woke up in a windowless white room. The light of a lone bulb, reflecting off the light surfaces, blinded his eyes. Everything around him was white. A small toilet, a sink, doors, bedding, and a metal bed. There was no watch on his hand. "What time is it?" Bill asked loudly. No one answered. Instead, the downstairs door opened a crack. A metal tray of food appeared.
How long did I sleep? The boy asked again. There was still no one answering him. There were no books, no newspapers, nothing around. Out of boredom, Bill began to walk around the room, counting his steps or minutes.
He decided that the lights would be turned off for the night and waited for that moment. A long time passed. He felt sleepy, but the light bulb was still on. It was also very difficult to sleep for that reason. He had to lie face down on his pillow. The food was the same all the time, and it was hard to tell at intervals what time it was. No one was answering questions. Bill listened, but not a sound came from outside. Seeing a camera in the corner of the ceiling, he tried to feign an epileptic fit, but no one came in to check on him. Attempts to rouse the guards with his singing also failed. Feeling himself starting to lose his mind, he wailed, "Tell me, what do you want? Marry Emily?" "I'll do anything, just let me out of here." Again, there was no answer. Realizing that time flew faster in his sleep, Bill went to bed. He dreamed of the same white room. Opening his eyes, he saw a copy of himself in the corner wearing the same clothes with the same haircut. "That can't be," Bill said, not believing his eyes. Again, his copy nodded in response. From that moment on, he lost touch with reality. 4 days after the kidnapping, he was dumped unconscious outside the house where the son was taken lying on the ground. Discovered by the new security guard of the house, hired by his father after the armed attack. Seeing that the guy is not himself, Daniel Volnov brought him to a psychiatric hospital. The next day, his dad came to visit him. Seeing his father alone, Bill asked, "Where's Mom?" "She hasn't been found yet." "What do you mean they haven't found her? With your connections, you could even get her out of a space station," Dad said in a cold tone without raising his voice. "I know nothing will happen to her." "Nothing? We had thugs break into our house and beat us up, dragged her outside in the middle of the night and taken away. And you say nothing's going to happen? Show me the bruises from your beatings." "Are you serious?" Bill asked resentfully. "Absolutely. If you've been beaten, show me." The boy hesitated. "That's just it. You were just dragged out. No one hit you." Don't exaggerate, wanting to see a bit of guilt or compassion on his father's stony face. The boy descended upon him with accusations. "Where were you when we were being led out like cattle? You were drinking with your friends again, weren't you? Why didn't you save us with your connections?" "Because there are bigger sharks in town than me, and because I don't intend to be responsible for your and Mom's decision, made without me. You crossed Jack Orlov. Do you even know who that is?" Hearing the name made Bill go pale. "He was the one who shot our grandfather in the knee when he refused to give him the house." "That's right. I thought Jack Antonovich had no children of his own, only a stepson. Where did he get a daughter from? Certainly not from his second wife." "Second," he marveled. "Who then? The first?" "Grace Orlova. Tanya's mom. The one you wanted." "What, you didn't even ask who you were sleeping with?" "Yeah, everyone said she didn't have a father, and she said so." The son began to justify himself. "People say a lot of things," he replied. "Apologized to her. And the sooner the better." Seeing Bill in front of the university with a huge bouquet of tea roses, she was surprised, and at first thought the flowers were meant for another girl. Emily was called out by her ex, seeing her walk off to the side. "Wait, what do you want? How mean are we? I just wanted to apologize. I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't realize what I wanted and I got scared. Let's be together. Let's get married, like you wanted." This surprised the girl. Trying to find a catch, she asked, "Why the sudden change? You know perfectly well. Don't pretend." "What, is your family suddenly afraid of heirs?" She grinned. "More like wanted to," he said. Taking Emily's hand, "Let's make up. We'll go to a restaurant. You'll get my mom back." Bill's voice trembled. Suddenly, he sat up and burst into tears. "What do you mean I'll get your mom back?" She asked with incomprehension. Your people took her away and haven't had her for over a week. What people? Bill, are you what? Your father's friends, the ex said through tears and kneeling down, begged, please forgive me. I swear I'll take care of you. The baby. Carry you in my arms. Just tell me. At least Mom's alive. I don't know, honestly, she replied in a confused voice. Stand up, please. Then your mom knows. I'll find out from her. Please. I'm begging you. I'm scared. I can't sleep properly for days now. Okay, then take me home. I'll ask my mom, wiping away her tears. Bill shook off his pants, ran to the car, and obligingly opened Emily's door. Honey, she tried to figure out when her mom had had time to address her father's friends about the unfortunate converses. She'd found out the same day, but nothing had been said about influential acquaintances. In addition, none of the relatives or buddies of her late father's mother had never communicated with or introduced her to God. Only two logical explanations came to mind. Either Bill got something mixed up, or Mom has an acquaintance who is unknown to her. On the way, the ex suggested stopping by the store and buying a cake for tea. Well, not to appear on the doorstep of the future mother-in-law with empty hands, he smiled. What makes you think I'm going to be your wife after all this? Looking into Emily's eyes, Bill took her hand and said, because you love me, or you wouldn't have kept the baby. Why would you spend your whole life looking at someone who was born to a guy you hate? It's not his fault his daddy's a scoundrel, but it is your fault. You're the one who chose me, not me. Emily talked me into talking to you. She did. But when we were dating, I don't remember your friend being involved. Are you right? That's my mistake. The car pulled into a parking lot outside a supermarket. Wait here, I'll be quick, the ex said, and ran into the store. Barely had his silhouette disappeared behind the door, she got out with a bouquet of roses and told the driver, Ethan, tell your boss I went home and I don't wish to see him as my guest. Roger that, the chauffeur nodded with a smile. Good day to you. Goodbye. The driveway was not far from the building where the store was. Entering the house, she shouted from the threshold, Are you home? Yes, hello, came a voice from the room, reading, Fill the vase with water, please. Bill gave me a big bouquet of roses. Mom looked out into the hallway, saw the bouquet, and got the biggest vase in the house for it. Trying to make amends, she asked. Yes, replied the daughter, apologized, almost on his knees, begging for forgiveness, says his mom was kidnapped. My dad's friends. So they got what they deserved. The scoundrels, the mother said. Fetching water, you got someone to deal with them, didn't you? I hope you haven't forgiven that rascal. Not yet, no. I don't see any love behind his words, only calculation. That's right. You don't need a husband like that, let alone a father for your child. But I chose him myself. Daughter, you're young, you don't know about men yet. No wonder you made a mistake, she said, taking the bouquet. The intercom rang. Who is it all of a sudden? The woman wondered. Bill came with me, wants to know where his mom is. And we don't know how much we know. You don't know what's wrong with her, either. No, I don't care what happens to that woman after what she's done. Let her disappear. Can you find out from your acquaintances what they did to her? I feel sorry for him. The call stopped. A message came over the phone from Bill, Mom's home. Pick up the cake. Thank you so much. How is she? Bill asked the doctor. Better, but still not good yet. Repeats the same thing several times. Doesn't sleep well, screams at night. She's been kept in a little white room in confinement. Like me, but much longer.
I'm terribly sorry for your grief. I hope the perpetrators are caught and punished.
We hope so, too, Bill lied. When he entered, Mom was sitting on her bed, mumbling something to herself. Hi, the son said with embarrassment in his voice.
They should pay for this, the mother said angrily, looking him straight in the eye. Who, the Smiths? Make them suffer for what they did to us.
Emily burst into tears. Bill rushed to comfort his mother. She was shaking and her sobs grew louder by the minute. Finally, she stopped and asked, Billy, is it really you?
It really is. Mum, don't I think so?
Do you want me to pinch it? The mother pulled her son's ear and said, I'm happy. I thought you were dead, that you were killed. Son, I won't survive such a loss. It's okay. Mom, I'm here for you, he hugged her. I hope it's for the long haul. Avenge me, avenge me. That lousy cleaning lady should know who she messed with. Her husband was Jack Smith. Do you know that? Mother was surprised. No, I thought they were just namesakes. She was his first wife. Then be careful, son. Smith is not one to be trifled with, except that she won't appreciate this act of her husband's. Yes, I was at the same party as her son. I don't think he's going to be happy about having a half-sister looking into his eyes, his mother pronounced. Tell him everything. I don't think Peter wants to lose his inheritance. Meeting Jack's stepson wasn't difficult for Bill. He knew where the boy spent his weekends. When he met him at a club and had a drink with him, he said casually, Why didn't you tell me you had a sister? I didn't realize. A drunken Peter marveled. What do you mean, a sister? Emily Smith is my ex-girlfriend, direct heiress to your stepfather. Yeah, he doesn't have kids. Something's messed up, check his passport. And if you don't believe me, otherwise why would he just help out some janitor's daughter? How did you know they were related? The interlocutor grinned. Not on your word. I hope when she said she was his daughter, I asked for the birth certificate. Not many people would want to pose as the child of a famous businessman to hook up with me, you know? And she really is his daughter, yeah. I'm telling you. Check it out for yourself. Peter took a cab and followed him from the club to his house. The boys went up the spiral staircase to the second floor. Once in his acquaintance's room, Bill asked, "Do you mean to say you have him keeping your passport?" "No, of course not. But I must have scans of all the pages." Once his computer crashed in his office and Jack was making copies of documents, the very same one, Peter said, pressing a button on the system unit, opening the right folder. The guy quickly found the necessary files and, checking them, was stunned. One of the passport pages did indeed have Emily Smith, unknown to him, listed as a child. "We should show my mom." "She'll kill him," Peter said. Bill held back his smile as best he could. Now her mom would be finished. "Let's go get drunk," the acquaintance suggested with sadness in his voice. "It's such a shame. You can't even imagine. I was hoping that when he died, the whole business empire would go to me and my mother. But in the end, no way. His daughter can have half of it. Mother didn't want to marry him. I persuaded not to give a damn what people think of him or what kind of man he is. One should look at his exuberance. Love comes and goes, but you always want money." Hearing these words, Bill was struck with the idea of taking Jack out by Peter's hands. By doing so, he would kill two birds with one stone. The news that Smith, a big businessman, had driven his car through his own garage door, into a neighbor's brick fence, and was now in the hospital, worried him. The news went viral across newspapers and social media. Opponents of the former candidate rejoiced. Emily's mother began to worry. Jessica and Noah received anxious calls from loved ones. Bill drove to his mother's house with a triumphant look on his face. "You know, she's much better today," the psychiatrist informed him, smiling all day. "Good appetite. Stop talking to herself." When he heard this, he realized that his mother already knew about his gift. As soon as the boy entered, his mother immediately rushed to his neck. "That rascal is in a coma." "Did you hear?" Emily asked. A spark of happiness flashed in her eyes. "I know. Guess who accomplished it?" With an enigmatic smile, her son whispered to her. "You?" the mother marveled. He nodded. "But how? It's his stepson, isn't it?" He was very upset when he found out about the heiress and had a little tinkering with his car. Smiling broadly, his mother kissed him and said, "You're the best, my hope and support, my protector." "Not like your father," the words made the boy brighten. "Glad to try, Mom. Anything for you, you know that." Leaving the hospital, Bill called Noah and asked, "So, are we going to celebrate? Are we going?" "Of course you're still asking. How did Mom blame herself at first? Thought it was all her fault. I told her about Jack's daughter, showed her passport details. Mom gave him a hard time about it. He drove out of the house in a rage. She thought it was the argument that made him lose control of the car. Only the two of us know is about something else," Bill continued. "Should we sit in a restaurant or a bar? It's going to be hard to talk at the bar. Let's go to the restaurant. And thank you for the idea. Of course, it would have been better if such a scoundrel had died right away. But a coma isn't bad either." "Agreed. Let's continue this conversation at the restaurant. In an hour. I want to make a quick stop on the way." "Okay," the man agreed, and they said their goodbyes. Bill had one last burden to get rid of. The pregnant Emily driving up to the university. He called his ex and reached out in a sweet voice. "Are you coming soon? I'm waiting for you here." "You're on time as always." "I'm on my way out." When he saw Emily, he glowered, anticipating how he was about to knock the ground out from under her feet. "What are you so happy about?" she asked. "I have my reasons, MUC. Now I'm free again." "Have you been seeing someone?" "No, I had to marry someone because I got her pregnant." "Have you managed to want someone other than me?" Bill laughed. "You're remarkably stupid if you don't realize this is about you. You see, your protector, your daddy is now in the hospital and can sleep the eternal sleep." "But what are you talking about? Who else? Are you trying to scare me?" "My daddy's been dead for a long time." "What are you talking about anyway? Haven't you looked at your birth certificate?" "Why?" "A look, see what you can find out. That your dad wasn't a paratrooper, but a gangster, for example." She didn't have to look for the birth certificate. Mom confessed everything herself and apologized. "So I'm the daughter of the head of the biggest business in town. Except he was in a car accident today. Brakes failed. It's been on the news all day, I heard about it." Bill said he's happy. "He's a bastard, isn't he?" "Do you want to visit your father?" Mother asked. Emily nodded. "Go, I don't mind. You won't keep me company. I'm afraid to see his current spouse there." He'll ask me who I am, she added. On the way to the hospital, Em thought about what she would say to his family if she met them in the room. She pictured her father's grief-stricken new wife, comforting him, the stepson's mother. However, there was no one near her dad. Emily exhaled a sigh of relief. She examined his stern features and decided that she would ask her mother at home about the story of their acquaintance. That night, Em and her mother lay awake for a long time discussing Jack over tea. "Do you think he'll make it?" she asked her mother. "His bullets didn't take him. What a wreck for him. As they say, it doesn't burn in fire, and it doesn't sink in water," she replied. "Will you say that too?" Emily laughed. She came to visit him every 3 days, asking the doctors if there was any improvement. "He's been twiddling his thumb recently," the nurse told her. "But in a coma? That doesn't tell you much, except that the finger isn't broken." "In that case, what would be a sign of regaining consciousness?" Em inquired. "When he begins to regain consciousness little by little, opens his eyes, begins to react briefly to sounds, moves gradually, coughs. The latter is a very good sign for him. It will mean that breathing has been restored," the nurse explained. "You visit him often. In fact, apart from you, no one has come in these 2 weeks," she added. Em wasn't surprised, figuring that perhaps her father's family now had enough to worry about in business. "She must be working a lot," Emily suggested. "Oh, don't make me laugh. It's just that no one wants him but you," the nurse replied. "What makes you think that?" Em wondered. The woman smiled. "I've worked here for many years, and I know if a loved one is in trouble, you forget all business. Some people have come here straight from an airplane, having flown a whole continent to him, knocking on the door at night, screaming at the windows. And your wife, even though she lives in this town, didn't even take the time to come here." The nurse's words made Emily think. She wanted to see at least a picture of her father's new wife. She typed his spouse's first and last name into a search engine. Looking at social media accounts, she found several posts by a supposedly grief-stricken woman who wrote how hard it was for her to watch her husband, not knowing whether he would survive or die. People sympathized with Jessica, not even realizing how deceived they were by her hypocrisy. A month and a half later, the doctor suggested to Jack's wife that she take him off life support. Upon learning of this, Em immediately texted her father's wife and asked her to withhold consent. In response, Jessica called her back and asked, "Why do you want to prolong his agony? Once he comes to his senses, he could be an invalid for the rest of his life. Believe me, Jack will never forgive himself for being a burden to others. If he becomes one, I'm willing to look after him," Emily replied. "For what?" "Counting on getting a piece of his business," Jessica snickered. "No, you're doing just fine with his companies without me," Em countered. "Besides, I don't know anything about this at all. Are you hoping to get some property?" "I don't mean to insult you, Jessica, but did it ever occur to you that I care about him because he's my father?" Emily laughed. "It's obvious you didn't know him personally, or you wouldn't have acted like that. Jack is a terrible man. There's a separate cauldron in hell for people like him." "We're not all saints," Jessica sighed and said, "It's good to sit with this log. I won't get in the way." Em was taken aback. "Well, what are you talking about?" "That's your husband. Wake up." "Emily, according to the doctors, he has 1 foot in the grave. You shouldn't get attached to someone you didn't even know." Tears came to the girl's eyes. Having finished talking, Emily cried and clung to her father's hand. "You've chosen a terrible wife, a monstrous wife," she said. "Please wake up, otherwise she'll kill you." Suddenly, Dad's finger stroked Em's cheek. Looking up, she saw that he had opened his eyes. Emily screamed, "Alive, alive. I'm so glad." Her father smiled gently. He seemed to know who was sitting in front of him. Recovery was hard, but Jack didn't give up. He was motivated to regain his relationship with Grace and help raise his granddaughter. He may have lost his business, but the property was still retained by him. The contract, drawn up in his right mind, provided for the accident of serious illness with the threat of imminent death. His wife Jessica became the owner of the business. Since she herself could not manage the affairs of the company, she turned over the management to her son Noah, Jack's lucky stepson. Having received everything, took up the cause and tried to maximize the deprivation of his stepfather all gained. As soon as the husband came to his senses, Jessica, who got everything, filed for divorce. Fortunately, this turn of events the former gang leader expected long before the accident. Gathering information about his daughter, he realized Em decent, all in the mother. So he put her on the list of directors and bought a large stake in his company in her name. When Noah wanted to change one of his major suppliers, he realized for the first time that he couldn't do it without his half-sister's vote. After receiving a threatening phone call from him, Emily turned to Jack. The father told everything to his daughter and suggested how to proceed. Realizing that through her will be able to manage the firm, he offered Em help on a permanent basis. Absolutely ignorant in this matter, the daughter, of course, agreed. Not wanting to share the company with someone else, Noah began to threaten Emily with death. Jack gave her the number of one of his friends. A few days later, the expensive car of the former stepson blew up right in the parking lot. The terrified Noah made no more threats. When Jack started walking on his own, Em's water broke. At the birth center, it was discovered that the baby was in the wrong position. She had a C-section. The hardest day of her life, not the day she woke up. In response to the question, "How's the baby?" she heard that the baby was stillborn. An already shaking post-op body had lost the will to live. For Emily, hearing that was harder than the word termination. All her preparation for motherhood for many months, all her plans and hopes collapsed in an instant. People close to her consoled her as best they could. Her mom spent hours listening to her on the phone while she was in the hospital. Her father used his savings to hire the best therapist. University friends called and wrote to be supportive. Bill didn't show up or send a single message. However, after hearing about the tragedy, his parents expressed their condolences. His mother was the first to offer a trip to the sea at their expense. 2 days later, his father joined her. He paid for the funeral of the little girl and said that he was ready to install a monument at his own expense. Bill's family came to the funeral in full force. Even Noah showed up to sympathize, which surprised both the former stepfather and Emily herself. When the father of the child put on the grave of the little girl a bouquet of small toy bears, Emily had a tantrum. Taking her daughter under her arm, her mother led her to a cab. "I don't understand what he wants here. He didn't pay the doctors for the delivery. They did not try to support me in any way. Told me to get rid of the baby. And now he's hypocritically putting this bouquet with tears," Emily said. "I'm far more surprised by his parents. Why all of a sudden all this spending? His mom's condolences? I don't believe it at all after everything I've heard. You think they're trying to suck up to you? Because you're a future businesswoman now, not just a cleaning lady's daughter. That could be it. I don't believe that snake has changed. She wants something." Barely enduring the wake, she drove home with her parents. All around, the mirrors covered with black cloth were awe-inspiring. She noticed that her room was empty. Gone was the crib she had bought. Gone were the pacifiers and the clothes she had given her baby. The photo album for the newborn that was lying on the shelf was gone too. Seeing a crucifix in the corner of the room, Emily closed the door and knelt down and asked, "Lord, I'm not a mom and I don't know any prayers. Please give me strength." That night she had an unusual and frightening dream. She had dug up a treasure which contained a gold locket. Opening it, she saw a picture of a girl who looked just like herself. Big blue eyes, wavy blonde hair, a birthmark on the left side of her neck. Feeling something native about the thing, she wanted to hold it to her chest. But suddenly a silhouette in black appeared and stole the locket. Emily wanted to run after him, but her feet became stuck in the ground. Trying to get out didn't work. She failed completely. Emily found herself in hell. One of the devils asked, "Teresa, treasure, here you go." At his flick, a diaper-wrapped newborn baby appeared in the girl's hands. Seeing them fall to the ground with her, unable to bear the weight, the devils laughed in the voices of Catherine and Grace and snatched the newborn. After that, she woke up and decided not to date anyone else until she graduated from university. Combining her studies, running a business and counseling with a therapist wasn't easy, but she managed. After a year, her grief was forgotten behind her parents' numerous activities and worries. Standing on her daughter's grave, Emily no longer cried. The next year, she devoted to reading books and attending seminars to run a successful business. Her father, as before, offered sensible solutions for the company through her, which allowed Em to gain more and more respect in the eyes of the other directors. Apart from Noah, her half-brother increasingly hated her. "He's proposing to cut the employees' pay because of his mistake. Can you imagine, Dad?" she exclaimed indignantly over the phone as she left the business center building. "But doesn't know how to take responsibility for his actions. If he does this, the candy factory will close. Not all people will go to work as before, getting paid $5,000 less. Noah doesn't think it's a significant amount for others. That's what I told him. Go to the factory and propose your initiative. People will appreciate it. But that's not what this is about." "Dad, who's Mike Johnson, Alex Johnson's son?" I think Dad replied in a thoughtful voice. "I don't recall that one. It's a new face on the board of directors. He hasn't been here before. I'm trying to figure out where he came from. Then it's definitely his son. There are only 2 ways to get on the board of directors, either by vote or by the contract we drew up when we merged our 9 businesses. He can be trusted. Alex was my right-hand man back in the day. I can't say anything about his son. I don't know him personally. But I trust his father almost as much as I trust you and Mom. Why? He and I hit it off. He's invited me for coffee tomorrow. I hope he doesn't make a pass at you. If he acts up, let me know. I'll talk to Alex and it won't happen again." After finishing her conversation with her father, Emily found herself in the parking lot outside the building. In front of her, Noah was drinking from a bottle, leaning against his car. "Don't tell me you're also driving now," she addressed him reproachfully. "Where's your private driver? What business is it of yours? It's his day off today. You could get into trouble yourself and make someone else disabled if you drive drunk. Well, since you're so smart, go ahead, Em. Run my life even more. I don't get enough of your meddling in my company," he said. "God, you're no good. Who gets behind the wheel like that?" "Idiots," Mike replied, appearing behind her shoulder. The new acquaintance quickly crossed the parking lot, and with one precise blow sent Noah lying unconscious on the pavement. Emily covered her mouth with her hand in horror. After examining Noah's head, he said, "Get the first aid kit, please. I'll call an ambulance in the meantime." "Why did you hit him?" "To make sure he didn't go anywhere drunk." The girl brought a first aid kit from her car. Taking out a sterile wipe, Mike explained to Em, "When I was 5, my mom was hit by a drunk driver in a crosswalk. There was no way to save her. I don't want anyone else to be without a loved one like I once was. I'm sorry. I realized the police might apprehend him when it was too late." "It's okay. You did the drastic thing, but the right thing. Noah wouldn't have listened to what I said anyway." A year after they met, Mike and Emily got married, and 2 years later they decided they wanted a baby. And 3 years later it turned out that the effects of the C-section could not be cured, and Emily, infertile, came home. In despair, waiting for Mike to return to tell him this unpleasant news. Realizing that every man wants an heir or heiress, Emily began to mentally prepare for divorce by reaching for a bottle of red wine. Her husband caught her in the kitchen with a glass. There was an empty bottle on the bar and crumpled paper napkins lying on the bar, soaking up Emily's tears. "Jesus, what's wrong, sunshine?" Mike asked, running up to give her a hug. "Mike, what are you going to do if you find out I can't give you a baby?" "The treatment didn't work," he asked anxiously. "None at all," Emily cried, even harder. "I am infertile. I can never have children again." Mike kissed the top of her head and said, "In that case, I'll offer you a choice. A surrogate mom, a baby from an orphanage, or just face your old age alone with me. Whatever you want. I'll accept whatever decision you make." "Really?" Mike nodded. "I'll think about it. I'll tell you later what I've chosen." At night, Emily couldn't sleep. She counted the cost of surrogate mothers, the risks, the conditions. She leafed through a database of children up for adoption. A 5-year-old blonde, sad-looking girl with big blue eyes caught her eye. Emily tried to remember where she might have seen her before. Opening the child's detailed profile, she looked at other photos. What she saw made her brace herself against the computer chair. The girl had the exact same birthmark. Emily, unable to contain her surprise, sent the link to the profile to her mom, asking to see the pictures. Afterward, she woke her husband. Behind her back, Mike walked over to the monitor, and after reading the girl's name, asked, "Emily, are you sure you want the adopted girl to be named like your late daughter?" "Look at her neck," Emily asked, ignoring her husband's question. Taking a closer look at the picture, he said, "Wow, what a coincidence, and a spot like yours. It's not just a birthmark. It's like a mark on the women in our family. Me, my mom, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, we all have it. How did she get it?" "You think it's some relative of yours?" "I already texted my mom a link to this girl's picture. I'm curious what she'll say." What she saw surprised Emily's mother. Calling her daughter in the morning, she said, "I showed this picture to your dad. He thinks it can't just be a coincidence, the girl's appearance, name and age. Said he'd run it through the old channels." "Whose baby is this?" "The profile says the mom gave her up. Do you want to adopt her?" "Yes, I feel something close, like I've seen it somewhere before. Remember that dream you told me about after Sarah died years ago? This wasn't the same girl in the locket picture." Emily thought for a few seconds, then spoke up. "Right you are. Grace, have you signed up for anything yet? The foster parent school won't let you adopt a girl just like that. You have to go through training, get the paperwork together." "You're right. We'll get on it all today," Emily replied. For a week she wasn't consumed with thoughts of illness, constantly leafing through the girl's pictures, rereading the information written in her profile over and over again. Emily studied out of school, which came easily to her and Bill. Her husband alerted the orphanage staff that he wanted to adopt Sarah specifically and asked if there were any other families willing to take the girl in with them. "No," the director replied. "You're the first one this year. Sarah is a difficult child." "What do you mean?" "She believes her real mom will come for her. She says she dreams about her mother, and sometimes if she rejects you, don't be frightened. Do you know what a woman who dreams looks like? She has blue eyes, big lips, and russet wavy, clean-cut hair, we understand. And she's also very rich," replied the child. "What's there to say?" "Never mind her fantasy," laughed the principal. "I'd love to, but you just described my wife," Bill said. Emily's father called her later in the week. "What's the news, Dad?" she asked him. "Shocking, honey. You'd better sit down." Emily sank into a chair and said, "Sarah is a relative of mine." "Yes, not just a relative. She's your daughter." From what she heard, Emily was speechless for a while. "Those scoundrels switched the baby at the maternity hospital," the father continued. "And Catherine showed up when you were in labor and bribed the birthing staff for a huge sum of money. They switched your daughter with a dead girl who was born to an alcoholic. Your baby wasn't wanted anyway. She was giving it to an orphanage." Tears flowed from Emily's eyes. God, why did she do that? So that an heiress wouldn't show up later to claim her son's estate. Afraid of trouble, the bastards. So that she would die with her damned son, the girl shouted through her tears. Someone else's life they're ready to break for their money. It may not be long before she dies, If it's any consolation to you, said the father. She stopped crying and asked, what do you mean? There's a rumor that she's been diagnosed with cancer. Her Bill drives around town paler than a dead man because of it. A few months later, having gathered all the necessary paperwork and passed the background checks, Emily saw her daughter in person for the first time.
Excited, Mike asked. Looking at his wife, she nodded. Her husband took her hand and waited with her for the girl to appear.
Sarah walked determinedly into the room and froze, looking at Emily. Hi, Mom said with a smile. Tears ran down the little girl's cheeks. She threw herself around Emily's neck and screamed, Mommy, I knew you'd come for me. I knew it. Emily hugged her daughter and said, I'm so glad I found you. You lost me, Sarah asked. In a way, she nodded in response.
When all the papers were signed and the family was getting into the cab, Emily's phone rang. Deciding not to take the call in the car, she stepped aside and said, Hello, hello.
Who am I talking to? Emily. Hello, it's Catherine Smith. She heard Bill's mother's voice and flinched. What was the momentary tense from? I know what you've done, Em said, shifting to a shout. I know you switched my daughter, forcing me to relive the funeral of my child. What more do you want from me? There was a pause. How do you know? I have my sources, Catherine Michael. I was just about to tell you about it. I don't believe you. Believe me, Emily, I don't need to take on that kind of responsibility. Have you picked her up yet? Yes, but don't expect to get to her again. I warn you, if you ever do anything to me or her again, I swear I will destroy you. Don't, Em, I've done terrible things to her and to you. Forgive me, please. It was unusually stuffy in the streets of the noisy city. Suddenly, a huge cloud came out from behind the horizon and covered the sky. Now a zigzag lightning flashed very close by. And then there was a thunderous roar, and the first drops began to fall on the ground. Immediately, the rain fell with an unbelievable noise. Streams of water whipped down the stairs, bending the thin trees to the ground. Linda had no time to hide and ran home, trying to shield herself from the rain with her handbag. In the end, she was soaked to the skin and very cold. She was shivering from the cold. But finally, a house showed around the corner. All the girl dreamed of now was to get warm and drink hot tea. But no sooner had she undressed in the corridor than her mother-in-law jumped up to her. She began to moan and wail, saying, Where are you going on the floor everywhere? You'll get dirty. You're all wet. Go to the bathroom immediately and wash your hands well. We will bring more contagion to the family from your ward. Linda sighed and excused herself for the 1,000th time. Mrs. Helen, there's no contagion in the infectious disease ward. It's not a veterinary clinic. There are people just like you in there. What's all this panic? Put the kettle on, please. I'm so tired and cold. But the woman's got a new lease on life. Yeah, there's no contagion there. Couldn't get a decent job. There's Matthew's friend, the pediatrician's wife, keeping the kids clean. Not like you. You didn't even have the sense to study to be a doctor. You're the only one below you as a cleaner. You make your own tea, not a queen. Come on, hurry up. Matthew will be here soon. What are you going to feed him? My blood pressure's skyrocketing. I haven't cooked anything. Linda closed herself in the bathroom, switched on the hot water, stood under the shower and cried bitterly. She was so tired. There was no strength at all. Living with her mother-in-law under the same roof was absolutely unbearable. For her, there was only one favorite person, her son. She revolved around him, and she didn't see Linda at all. Even the news of Linda's pregnancy didn't soften her. All she heard was that there was nothing to be special about, that everyone gave birth and nothing. Toxicosis, throwing up all the time. Lately, her relationship with Matthew had broken down. When she had cleaned herself up, Linda started to prepare dinner. She boiled pasta, fried chops, and cut vegetables for salad. She kept waiting for Matthew to arrive. He did come, but it was almost nighttime. He glanced at his wife and mumbled, "Hello. I'm so tired I'm not hungry," and went into the bedroom. He refused to eat dinner and went to bed. Linda threw the knife into the sink and thought, who did I spend 2 hours cooking for? I wonder if all families live like this. Her mother-in-law complained, "What's the matter with Matthew? He's so upset. He didn't even ask me how I was. He didn't eat. What's the matter? Or did you have a fight while I was in the yard?" Linda replied dryly, "No, we didn't have time. He just said hello and went to bed. I don't know what's wrong with him. Ask him in the morning." The woman started up again, determined to vent her anger on her sister-in-law. What a wife. You don't know what's going on with your husband. Or you do not care. I do not understand. So you can lose your husband if you are not interested in his affairs. The daughter-in-law was so tired that she decided not to continue this unpleasant conversation. She only replied, "Good night to you too, Mum." That night, Linda rolled around for a long time, could not sleep. Her mother-in-law had a point. She and Matthew had become like strangers lately. Common phrases, "Hello, how are you? What will you eat?" A kiss on the cheek, and not always. That's all love is. But it wasn't always like that. I mean, she and Matthew used to be so happy, making plans, sharing everything. When, at what point did it end? And more importantly, why? Linda didn't know the answer to that question. Linda's family was the usual mom, accountant, dad, plumber. Living like everyone else, making ends meet. They weren't poor. Dad's hands were skillful. He often went on part-time jobs to have extra income. The parents loved their only daughter very much, tried to make sure she was well-dressed. They took her to different sections. In summer, they went to the river with tents, so the girl remembered her childhood with warm nostalgia as the best carefree time. Since childhood, Linda loved to treat dolls, was interested in medical topics, and dreamed of becoming a doctor when she grew up. Her parents supported her endeavors and persistently saved money for her daughter to enter and study in another city. But trouble came when they were not expecting it. Daddy fell seriously ill. He needed first very complicated surgeries, and then a long rehabilitation. And it all happened just before she entered the university. At the family council, all of them, without collusion, decided that the family savings would be spent on her father's treatment. His life was at stake. And to leave her father in a difficult moment, and leave for a long time in another city, Linda simply could not. He was the closest person to her, and she and her mother began to fight for his health. Therefore, no matter how frustrating it was, but instead of university, she decided to enter the medical college in her city on the nursing department. She studied with great desire and enthusiasm. She was not afraid of blood or complicated procedures. Everything came easily to her somehow. And on practice in the department went without fear. She knew how to get along with patients. Boys around the pretty student often hovered around, called her to join their company, and so walked to the cinema or cafe. The girl sometimes went out with her friends, but she was uninterested and bored. Incompetent courtship of inexperienced fiancés only irritated. After graduating from college, she was hired to work in the infectious disease department. Linda found it challenging at first. The patients were mostly heavy, with various, sometimes complicated infectious diseases. They needed special care. But the girl was clever, quickly got used to it. Relations with the team also got better at once. She was appreciated for her diligence and compassion for patients. It was there at work that she met her future husband. He was brought in by ambulance with serious poisoning, and Linda helped him. The guy was sick to his stomach, pale as a sheet, severe dehydration. He kept looking at Linda and asking if he was going to die. He was so sick. Linda promised he'd be fine. She gave him drips, pills, and injections. Soon the guy recovered, joked, and thanked the doctors and Linda for his salvation, and also called the girl an angel in a white coat, showered with compliments. Sympathy between them arose immediately, and then it smoothly grew into love. The guy was older than the bride by 8 years, long ago graduated from university, and tried to start his own business. He was looking for something to do, how to break through and make money. He really had an entrepreneurial spirit. At first he just resold spare parts for cars, and then he was able to open his own repair shop. His fiancée often picked Linda up from work. He gallantly opened the car door, always kissed her tenderly when he met her. All Linda's girlfriends were jealous, and Andy's colleague was delighted. "You're lucky, Linda. You've got such a promising fiancé. When your Matthew gets into the swing of things, you'll be like a cheese and butter, and you won't have to work. Not like my Gregory, who gets drunk with his mates and gets into trouble. And you don't let your happiness slip away and get married." Mum was happy for her daughter, too. Matthew made a good impression on her. He said he loved her, that he would cherish her. But her father was wary of his future son-in-law. He thought that Matthew promised too much, and that he didn't know what would happen in reality. Mr. Justin himself was a man of few words. He had proved his love by deeds, and therefore he did not like to be trifled with. But like any father, he wished his daughter only happiness. He saw her eyes shining, so he didn't interfere with the young people. And Linda herself just worked hard. Unlike her peers who only had parties and entertainment on their minds, Matthew was serious and seemed so reliable. He was all about family. He courted her so beautifully, called her doll and gave her lovely bouquets and gifts, and he kept praising his house and his mum. I'll invite you to visit. You'll see what kind of vegetable garden Mum keeps. There's nothing there, everything fresh, natural. I hope you like my house. It's spacious and cozy, everything you need for a comfortable life. I expect we'll live there after we get married. I haven't saved up for a separate place, and I don't want to wander around rented flats. It's no big deal if we live with Mum. I'm sure you two will get along, and I'm more comfortable with it. Mum and I are very close. Her blood pressure spikes a lot. I wouldn't want to leave her alone. She'll get sick from all the stress. Linda was worried. At work, she often heard how difficult the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law can be, but she hoped that this would not happen to her. But she did not want to contradict the groom. The girl loved him very much and was afraid of losing him. Difficulties in their relationship began later, when Matthew introduced the bride to his mother and invited her to dinner at his house. Matthew's mum was upset that her only adored son chose an ordinary nurse as his wife. She wanted her son's wife to be a different girl with a rich dowry, already established in life. Even though Mrs. Helen wasn't an aristocrat herself, she raised her son alone. All her life, though, she'd worked as a shop steward. I suppose that's why she thought herself superior to others. But no matter how Mrs. Helen discouraged her son from getting married, he was adamant and determined. And the celebration did take place. Linda had sensed her latent dislike for the groom's mother when she met her. Mrs. Helen made it clear that she was the only one in the house, and she would have it no other way. When Linda took to help wash the dishes after the feast, the future mother-in-law immediately began to teach her. Lord, who washes like that? Let me do it. You need to rinse twice, then wipe dry to a squeak and put everything in its place. I can't stand disorder. You young people should be taught everything. You're so clueless. Linda realized it was unlikely that their relationship would ever be warm. But she still believed that in time Matthew's mother would come to terms with their son's choice and her presence in the house, and everything would improve. The future mother-in-law at the wedding still restrained herself, as Linda's parents would not allow her to speak ill of her daughter-in-law. She only grumbled unhappily when she saw her parents' gifts. They'd bought a great set of crockery, beautiful bed linen, and many other things for the family. On behalf of herself, Mrs. Helen gave a card with a tidy sum on the account and proudly informed everyone about it. Though Linda never saw the money, her husband took the card for himself. And when the young couple started living with her, the mother-in-law got even. Matthew had a good house and a nice warm outbuilding in the yard with all the comforts. Mrs. Helen did not even think of moving there and allowing the newlyweds to live separately. On the contrary, she literally went back and forth all the time. She overheard all the conversations, pestered with advice and moralizing. Linda repeatedly asked her husband to rent a flat. She was uncomfortable from the beginning. In this house, you had to follow all the rules of the mother-in-law, and if anything wrong, immediately scandal. But Matthew loved his mother very much and did not want to move out. Matthew was very comfortable. Now he had two women taking care of him at once, and it was more comfortable at home. So why complicate his life? Besides, Matthew changed a lot after the wedding. He became very stingy, even greedy. He made a good living. Linda also gave all her salary honestly to the family, but she didn't see any return. Buying a new dress or other things, such as cosmetics, always caused dissatisfaction with her husband and mother-in-law. The two of them would start teaching Linda about life. You're too wasteful. You have a wardrobe full of clothes. Is there nothing to wear? You have to save money, otherwise you can waste it all. It was all her mother's influence, Linda thought. Though she didn't understand where the money in their family went and what it was spent on. Matthew and her mother bought groceries and everything they needed. Linda only cooked, did the laundry, and cleaned up after everyone. After 4 years of living like this, she was getting bored with it. Her father had a second-hand foreign car, and Linda was good at driving. Dad had taught her, and she had her license. But her husband was reluctant to let her drive, only if she had to go to the shop or pick him up from a noisy party. The girl dreamed of having her own car, because to work had to go an hour by bus with a transfer. But her husband and mother-in-law did not want to hear about it. They said there was nothing to be posh about. Linda did not like this attitude towards her. All the more so because before the wedding everything had been quite different. Matthew didn't spare any money on her. He gave her beautiful bouquets. They often went to the cinema or theater or to friends. In the last year, they'd been out on the town for only a handful of times. To tell about all this, parents did not want to tell, so that they did not get upset that her daughter's family life does not go well. Linda was not used to complaining to her friends either. No one would simply not believe her. After all, outwardly, they had a normal family. They lived in prosperity. When Linda found out about her pregnancy, she was very happy. She thought that now everything would change. Her husband would carry her in his arms, and her mother-in-law would be happy that the grandchildren would come and would stop nagging her. But how could it not be so? Matthew didn't take the news with much enthusiasm. He just said, "Well, pregnant is pregnant. I hope it's a boy. I don't want to bother with girls." Her mother-in-law didn't treat her any better either. On the contrary, all said that pregnancy is not a reason to be lazy and forgive everything, and how she herself, being pregnant, even renovated the house, and nothing did not fall apart. Only her parents were happy, congratulating their daughter and looking forward to grandchildren. Matthew had become distant in the last month. He came late, went away on weekends, never told Linda anything, and if she started to question him, he got angry. That's a man's business. They don't concern you. It's your business to cook and run the house. Look at your mother. She works all day long. She never sits down, and she's working in the garden. But don't you have anything else to do but pester your husband with silly questions? But Matthew never forgot his beloved mother, and she hung around her adored son. She waited for him all the time and did not forget to complain about her daughter-in-law. Linda was so sick of it all. She didn't feel happy in her marriage at all. She was like a stranger in this family. Soon Matthew was hurriedly going on a business trip. Linda was very upset because she would have to spend all her evenings with her mother-in-law. It was not a good prospect. All week the girl listened to reproaches and nagging in her address. She stayed late at work twice just to avoid hearing all this. Finally, Matthew was back. Linda missed him so much. She rushed to hug her husband, hurried to show him the ultrasound results, where their baby was clearly visible. But the man only looked at her with tired, sad eyes and gently pulled her away. "Nice, let's talk about this later. I'm so tired. I'm going to go to bed from the road. Oh, I almost forgot. There are 2 bags in the back of the car. Take them, I bought you in Mum Presents, and go to the shop. Here are the keys. Get some tea, we'll have a family night out." Matthew fell asleep instantly. As soon as his head hit the pillow, Linda sighed and went to the car. She took out a bag of presents and looked inside. It was the same as always, 2 identical neckerchiefs. The girl even had tears of resentment. "Only my mother-in-law wears such scarves. I can't stand them, and Matthew knows it. So the gift was bought for Mum and I was just for show. I don't mean anything to him," Linda thought. She gave the gift to her mother-in-law. She got into the car to drive to the shop. The girl was very nervous and, sitting down, accidentally knocked her bag on the floor of the cabin. Linda went under the seat to retrieve the fallen things and fumbled for some strange object. She pulled it out. What was her surprise when she saw a small mini dictaphone for listening. Linda twisted it this way and that, and finally figured out how to switch on the recording. She was driven by pure curiosity. She wondered what the thing was in the car for and who had hidden it there. Suddenly she heard a dialogue between her husband and a girl on the tape. The husband was whispering softly, "Come to me, my darling, come to me. How much I missed you. Oh, how sweet you are, like a candy." Then the laughter of the young lady and the obvious sound of a passionate kiss. Everything inside shattered. Linda couldn't believe it. She listened to the tape several times. Tears covered her eyes, that's what it was. That's what kind of business trip Matthew had been on. Is that why he was so tired? Blood pounded in her temples. Linda couldn't remember herself. She rushed back to the house, burst into the bedroom and started pushing her husband, shaking him and shouting, "Get up, you scoundrel, you scoundrel. I hate you. How could you do this to me? I'm carrying your child under my heart. We have a family." Was that girl really worth it? My husband jumped up, rubbing his eyes, unable to understand. Linda, stop. Stop it. What the hell bit you? What are you talking about? His mother-in-law came screaming and stood in the doorway, watching the family scene. Linda turned the tape up to full volume and then shouted, "Not only are you cheating on me, but you left the tape recorder in the car. What, do you listen to this filth at home at night? It's disgusting." Matthew realized he had nothing to say. He's just a mumbler. Do you think I'm an idiot? I don't know who did this to me. And then the mother-in-law entered the arena. She smiled wryly and confessed, "It's very good that you know everything now, Linda. You yourself, son, would never have admitted that you love another woman. I've even met her. Emma's a lawyer, by the way. She owns her own firm. Not like you, Linda. She and Matthew love each other. It's about time you found out. What did you think? Or did you think my little boy was going to be stuck with you forever? He's got a lot of eyes on him. We don't know whose child you're trying to tie my son to. You spend your nights in your hospital doing who knows what. So it's time for you to get out." The man grabbed his head. "Mom, what are you talking about? Who asked you to interfere? Stay out of this." Mrs. Helen hurried away with the words, "All right, you two work it out. I'm doing my best for you, son. You'll thank me when we get rid of this burden." Linda looked at her husband in shock, waiting for an explanation. She still thought it was a mistake, a bad dream. But Matthew mumbled, "Linda, it's just a fling. I have no intention of leaving my family, but it just happened. It's the devil's own fault. Emma's been helping me with my business paperwork. I don't know how I got involved with her. Let's just forget the whole thing. It was a bit of a slip-up. Who doesn't?" The girl was shocked by such insolence. She immediately began to pack her things and shouted, "Do you hear yourself? How can I forget such a thing? How can I sleep in the same bed with you now? Trust you at all? You know your mother's right. I've been a stranger here, unhappy in this house from day one. I'm not your maid. Cook, clean, and please, Mum. You don't give a damn about me and my wishes and interests. I don't even see my salary. I have to beg for even the most basic necessities. You probably spend more on your mistress. You're not stingy. Goodbye, Shul. We're getting divorced. Go back to your girlfriend and live happily ever after. I hope your mum's happy." Matthew ran after her to the gate, asking for forgiveness. But Linda had already made up her mind she couldn't forgive such a betrayal, and she wasn't going to live in her mother-in-law's house anymore. The husband was angry. "Who needs you? Think about the child. He needs a father. Be aware, if we divorce, I will not recognize him, and on alimony you cannot count on. What money are you going to raise him on? On your penny wage." But she replied firmly, "Nothing, we won't starve. Consider that he is not yours and choke on your alimony. We'll live without you. We don't need a scumbag father like you." Linda drove to her parents' house without thinking. She was shaking all the way. She cried on the bus and did not know how to tell her family. Her father didn't interfere yet. He listened silently, frowning, and Linda sobbed on her mother's shoulder, confusedly telling everything. Everything that had accumulated in her for all these years was pouring out in an avalanche. She had longed to speak out about everything that was troubling her. Mum sighed, comforting Linda. "God, my daughter, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you say before that you felt bad, that you were so humiliated there? Why did you put up with all these years? My poor girl. I never thought Matthew would turn out to be such a spineless mama's boy and a womanizer. Well, you'll stay with us for a while, calm down, come to your senses, and then we'll see. Maybe things will get better and Matthew will come to his senses and choose a family. But don't go back to your mother-in-law. She won't let you live in peace." Dad fussed and commanded, "Okay, daughter, you've cried, and that's enough. You mustn't be nervous now, you're pregnant. Mother, bring warm milk. Honey is the best remedy for nerves. And you lie down, daughter, drink some milk and sleep. And don't think about that scoundrel. Let him live as he likes. And now we all have to stick together and wait for our grandson. We're with you. You're not alone. Everything will be all right." Linda felt a little better. She hugged her parents and thanked them for understanding her and supporting her in a difficult moment. Now she would definitely not break down. She would make it through. Little by little, Linda was coming round. Matthew tried to call several times, but she didn't answer the phone. At work, her colleagues didn't understand her and discouraged her from getting divorced. They said, "Linda, don't be daft. What are you doing? Well, your Matthew had a fling once. It happens. It's not like he's pushing for a divorce. Where else are you going to find a man like that? He doesn't drink. He doesn't hit. He's a hard worker. He's got money. And the baby needs a father. Well, you showed character. Good for you. Forgive him and move on." But Linda couldn't and didn't want to. She was so calm, so happy in her parents' flat. No one nagged her anymore. No one tried to teach her about life. In the evenings, her mother waited for her from work They had dinner together, shared the news. Her exhausted nervous system slowly came to order. A week later, a respectable, young, pleasant man came to her workplace. He introduced himself. "Hello, Linda. My name is Nicholas Brown. I'm a colleague of your husband's. You see, I put a tape recorder in his car, and I've unwittingly caused your divorce. I'm sorry, that's not the outcome I was hoping for. And I'll tell you, you ruined the whole scheme when you found him early." Linda sat down on a chair, started asking questions. "Well, Nicholas, maybe it's a good thing that I found your device. Otherwise, I'd be living a lie. What I don't understand is, why did you plan it? Were you interested in Matthew's affairs?" The man shook his head. "That's the least you've learnt, Linda. Your husband is full of surprises. I'll start at the beginning so you'll understand. I had a brother, Ben, only 3 years older. When we were kids, we were thick as thieves. He became a cop. It was his childhood dream. I went to school for economics. 2 years ago, Ben worked on a case. He and his operatives were working on a smuggler who was illegally transporting and trading precious metals abroad. He had a small car repair shop and a used foreign car for diversion. He lived modestly. No one even guessed that. In fact, he was almost a millionaire. His business was dirty, with gangsters. Now, Linda, this smuggler turned out to be your husband, Matthew Schull. I'm sure you had no idea, did you?" Linda was shocked and struggled to find the words. "Wait a minute. But there must be some kind of mistake. Although if it's true, then this scoundrel was taking my salary for family expenses, and he was running around with mistresses somewhere. I realized I didn't know the man I'd been married to for 4 years. Just in my head, all this does not fit." Nicholas continued, "When my brother got too close to Schull and was ready to take down his criminal gang, he was suddenly hit by a tinted car with hidden license plates. I'm sure it wasn't your husband. He probably hired someone to take Ben out. I swore on my brother's grave that I would see this through. This is for his death. I took a job with your husband as purchasing manager. I'm a cop myself. I'm undercover now, so I planted that tape recorder. I was hoping to find out something important about the case. Now I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get into Schull's files. I'm sure he keeps his secret books somewhere safe." In the mind of an aggrieved Linda, she immediately plotted her revenge. So she came up with one. "I'll help you. I really want that bastard to answer for everything. I know the code to the husband's safe, and I can photograph all the documents. I hope that'll help you. I'll go today. I still haven't got all my things." The man waved his hands in the air. "No, Linda, that won't do. I know you're in your condition, and I don't want you to take any chances because of me. You don't want any trouble or stress right now. So I'll just have to do this on my own." "All right, I'm gonna go. Here's my card just in case. Don't despair, it'll all work out. You're young, you'll be a mom soon. It's gonna be a whole new happy life." Linda wouldn't listen. She took a day off work. It was important to her that Matthew wasn't home, and at a time like this, he's definitely at work. She would distract her mother-in-law somehow. The girl was very worried, felt like a spy, and took a taxi to her mother-in-law's house. She met her unfriendly. "Oh, why did you come? You're getting a divorce. There's nothing for you to do here now." Linda, not the least bit frightened, replied, "Good afternoon to you too, Mrs. Helen. Don't worry. I'm not going to live with you anymore. And I'm not going to put up with Matthew either. I'm just going to get my things." Her mother-in-law didn't look at her kindly, but she let her pass and literally followed her around, making sure her daughter-in-law didn't take anything she didn't think she needed. Linda was nervous, for she had to find her husband's papers. Finally, she was in luck. Her mother-in-law's mobile phone rang, and she went to her room to talk. Linda rushed into her husband's office, dialed the code of the safe, and pulled out a pile of papers with shaking hands. Just then she heard footsteps down the corridor. Her heart sank into her heels. Blood rushed to her head. She realized that she wouldn't have time to take a picture of the documents, so she simply slipped them into her pocket and shut the safe door quietly. And then she made a deliberately loud fuss and moved the chair. My mother-in-law immediately burst into the office. "What are you looking for? You certainly didn't leave your things here." Linda tried to answer calmly. "An earring. Matthew and I had a little spree here a while back. Maybe this is where I dropped it. There it is. Thank goodness. That's it. I'll be off now. Goodbye, Mrs. Helen." I hope your next daughter-in-law will be more to your liking. Though with your insufferable temper, I don't think that's likely. The mother-in-law sang angrily, "Go away. And don't give me a hard time, you cad." Linda walked out of the gate and sighed with relief. I did it. Well, hang in there, Matthew. I hope Nicholas brings you to justice. And you'll be held to account. She phoned him in the taxi and told him cheerfully, "I've got it all. Where are we meeting?" "Okay, I'll be at the meeting in an hour." Linda spotted him from a distance. Handsome, trim and fit. You can't help but admire him. She approached the man, said hello, and started pulling out her ID from her purse. And then the unbelievable happened. 3 policemen jumped out of the car behind her. They rounded up both Linda and Nicholas. They said, "Mrs. Linda Schul, you're accused of stealing your husband Matthew Schul's identity. So come with us to the station, we'll sort it all out." Linda was very frightened and cried. She berated herself. How did they find me? What's going to happen now? I'll probably go to jail. What a fool. What was I thinking? How scary. The thing is, she had no idea what it was really like and how cunning her mother-in-law was. When Linda came to collect her things, Mrs. Helen suspected something was wrong. The woman followed Linda discreetly, and when she started to open her son's safe, she filmed everything on her phone, hiding behind the door. She immediately sent it all to her son, and he ran to the police and filed a report. And to calculate Linda's whereabouts on the phone number in general was easy, so the woman got caught. It was hot in the station. Linda cried, apologized, tried to justify herself. "I'm not a thief, I've never taken anything. It's just that my husband betrayed me, cheated on me. And today I found out he's been leading a double life all these years. He's a smuggler. Nicholas told me, so I decided to expose him. He has to answer for what he's done." "Oh, Mommy, I feel sick. Where's the loo?" "I feel sick. I'm pregnant." The policemen looked at each other, but still took the dead knee to the toilet. Linda didn't come out for a while. Pale as a sheet, exhausted. She'd been sick to her stomach for half an hour. The coroner thought to himself, she doesn't look like she's faking, but she's bad, and she doesn't look like a thief. More like a woman confused, so he made a mess of things. Jealousy can do a lot of things. Sometimes it even goes as far as murder. We need to nail this Nicholas and find out what he's all about. What if he's her lover? What if they're in cahoots? Nicholas was terribly angry and thought to himself, "Well, I told you not to get involved in anything." No, she still stuck her nose in and ruined everything for me again. What a willful and stubborn girl. I'm going to have to lay it all on the line. There's no other way. Otherwise, Linda's stupidity will really get her in trouble. The man told the station who he really was, and that Linda had nothing to do with it, just wanted to help. And it all turned out so stupid. He spoke passionately. "Did you even look at the paperwork? Schul is a criminal, and he's breaking every law in the book. He drove my brother to his grave, and he's just going to get away with it." When the investigator read it all, he whistled. "Wow, that's some serious dirt. You should thank your girlfriend. She worked so hard for you." Well, now we can reopen the case. And here I was thinking Schul was begging me to give him the file right away. And I promised him I would. But now things have changed. By the way, I think it's time to let the girl go. I think 3 hours in a cell will teach her not to do that again. Linda was finally released. She felt so bad that she just sat down on a bench outside the station and pondered where she could find the strength to get home. This horrible day seemed endless to her. Just then, Nicholas called out to her. "Well, homegrown detective? Let's go. I'll take you home. Tell me, why did you get involved in this case? I told you not to do anything." Suddenly, the woman couldn't take it anymore and burst into loud, childish tears. "I wanted to help. And you're scolding me?" Nicholas realized he'd overreacted. He sat down beside her, took her shyly by the hand, and began to comfort her. "I'm sorry, Linda. I know you meant well. But now you realize how risky it was. You don't know your husband at all. He's a dangerous man. So get a quick divorce and start a new life. And know that you're not alone. I'll always be here for you. I'll help you, I'll support you. All right, don't cry. You can't. Get in the car. Let's go. It's nighttime. My parents must be worried." Linda didn't realize she'd fallen asleep on the way. She just closed her eyes and fell into darkness. And Nicholas looked at her, so defenseless. Her hair was mussed, her cheeks were burning, and her heart ached. He wanted to keep this naive, frightened girl close to him, to protect her from hurt and harm. He had never felt such amazing feelings for anyone. He wondered at himself. He carefully took Linda in his arms and carried her gently into the flat. His parents only wanted to make a fuss, but he put his finger to his lips and said quietly, "Hush, I'll explain everything later. She's had a very difficult day. Let her sleep, she needs it now," Mrs. Rachel suggested. "Thank you, Nicholas, for giving my daughter a lift. Why don't you have some tea? We could get to know each other. I'm just about to have some cottage cheese." Nicholas's stomach rumbled. He remembered he hadn't eaten in a long time and agreed. He had a long chat with Mrs. Rachel and Mr. Justin. He devoured the still warm pastries with gusto. It was as cozy as home in that hospitable house. From that day on, Nicholas visited Linda often. He helped her with her divorce and supported her in every way possible. They talked and walked a lot, and did not notice how they fell in love with each other. Now Nicholas understood what it means to love the soul without touching the body. They felt so good, so easy and relaxed together, as if they had known each other for 100 years. Matthew called Linda several more times, insulting her, shouting into the phone, "You snake! You got mixed up with the cops and decided to go against me. I will destroy you. I bet you've been going out with him a long time. I bet he got you pregnant, too, didn't he? My mother was right. She saw right through you. You'll pay for the trouble you've caused me." Nicholas blocked Matthew from Linda's phone, picked her up and dropped her off every day. He never left her alone for a minute. He reassured her, "Don't worry, Matthew will soon be in trouble himself. No amount of big-name lawyers will help. He's the one in agony, realizing the end is near." Nicholas was absolutely right. Matthew had spent huge sums of money on lawyers, on getting bail before the trial. The clandestine illegal business had to be shut down in a hurry. The official business was bursting at the seams. The man was hastily withdrawing all the money from his accounts. Many of them were already blocked. The investigator was digging deep, stepping on his heels, and Matthew was getting cold feet. He didn't want to go to jail at all, so he decided to run. He'd had fake documents for a rainy day for a long time. The family had fallen apart. His mistress, smelling danger, broke up with him immediately. She didn't want any trouble, and his mom was harassing him day and night. "Matthew, my son, you've been walking around like a man in water, not eating at all. Is it the divorce that's got you so upset? Forget that nurse, you'll find yourself a better woman. You've got a very smart fiancée, Emma. She's got business acumen. I like her a lot. Have you forgotten all about Mom? No interest in my health. My blood pressure's off the charts from nerves. I'm about to go into bed." These conversations pissed him off. On the one hand, he was very angry at his ex-wife. His male ego was hurt, because he was absolutely sure that Linda adores him, will forgive him this stupid affair on the side in return. But on the other hand, he desperately missed her affection and warmth. When she was around, he didn't notice it at all. But when he was alone, it became so nauseating, even howl. The man was angry. "Mother, leave me alone. I don't have time for you now. And don't go to Emma's again. We broke up. I have to go away for a long time. The police will come. You can tell them you don't know anything. I won't be able to call or write for a while. I've got to get away before it's too late." But Matthew didn't get far. He was picked up at the airport with someone else's documents in his hands, and he went to prison. Friends and former colleagues immediately turned away, so as not to get dirty in this dirty business themselves. The man was desperate. He was given 10 years for illegal manipulation of money and jewelry. And the prison life began. A cramped, stuffy cell, a cloudy, unwashed window with bars, through which almost no light came in, iron bunks with bad-smelling mattresses and hardened convicts. It was damp and gloomy, and the door with the feeding trough, like a bone to the dogs, was killing. Matthew fell into a deep despondency and ennui. He often remembered Linda, her warm smile and gentle hands, her care, and he wondered to himself, "My God, how could I not have noticed all this before? I took everything for granted, obeyed my mom, didn't respect my wife, didn't appreciate her. That's what I lacked. Why did I get mixed up with Emma? Why didn't I give up my shady dealings when I got married? I kept saving those damn millions, hiding it from everyone. And for who? What for? It's like I was writing a draft. My baby's probably already born. I wonder if I married that guy. Will my son or daughter call him daddy? And I'll always be a stranger to my child, a nobody." Periods of depression and longing were replaced by anger and even hatred towards his ex-wife. Matthew was determined that he would meet her when he got out, and she would let him see his child. That was the only thing that kept him warm. Over time, it became an obsession. His mother wrote him long letters and sometimes sent him parcels. But Matthew didn't answer them directly. He blamed his mother for all his troubles, too. He thought she had driven Linda to the point where she had left him for good. One thing the man never understood, the most important, that the culprit of everything that happened to him, he himself, and no one else. At Linda, on the contrary, life slowly began to improve. Nicholas Brown offered her hand and heart, and they moved to live in his flat. Parents were happy for their daughter, saw how the guy sincerely loved and cared for her. The girl, of course, worried whether Nicholas could love her baby. After all, the heart cannot command. Suddenly tired of all the troubles and sleepless nights, she would have to go through a painful breakup again. She even cried at night, secretly into her pillow, tormented by these bad thoughts. But her fears were in vain. Nicholas, together with her, went to the courses of young parents, learning to swaddle. And when her beloved was taken to the hospital, he could not find a place. He calmed down only when he was allowed to Linda in the room. He immediately took the baby in his arms and timidly stroked the baby on the cheeks, saying, "Here we are, our son is born. How small, so defenseless. But nothing, Daddy, is near. When you grow up, we'll play football together, go fishing. I'll teach you how to drive. In the meantime, eat well and grow up healthy." Linda cried and laughed at the same time. It was so touching. "Thank you for everything, Nicholas. I'm the happiest I've ever been in. Honestly, can you believe it? I didn't even know men could love like that. I'm so glad we met. What shall we name the baby?" The man got serious and proposed. "I'd like him to be called Ben, like my brother. If you don't mind, of course. Thank you, sweetheart. I didn't know I could fall in love like this. My family is the most important thing in my life, and I'm glad you let me be a part of it." Nicholas arrived with balloons and flowers and all the family. Linda gasped when she looked out the window. There were parents on both sides and friends waiting for her in the courtyard of the maternity hospital. Everyone was sincerely congratulating, wishing Mummy and baby happiness and health. The nurse, giving the baby to Nicholas, joked, "Well, Daddy, congratulations. Don't delay while you are young. Come back for the second one." Too, her words proved prophetic, and a year later Linda gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Nancy, in the same maternity hospital, surprised the whole family. And Linda herself did not immediately realize that she was pregnant. She couldn't wait for her cycle to get better. Her breasts were already sore from too much milk and nursing, and the lower abdomen was pulling. And only when the baby began to push in her belly, everything became clear. The woman was even frightened. How will she be able to manage such small children? But Nicholas was very happy and assured her that he would be the first assistant and together they would manage. He spoke eagerly. "I understand your anxiety. You're probably afraid that I'll love my child more. No, I'm not. Get it through your head they're my two children. That's how I see it. A son and a daughter. And I'm going to love them exactly the same. But it'll be great for the kids to grow up together. They'll be good friends. It'll be hard at first. But then when the kids grow up, they'll be the closest people, like me and my brother. The closest person I've ever had." Linda was completely absorbed in motherhood, even though it wasn't easy at first. Babies are small, capricious, a lot of trouble. But Nicholas helped her in everything and bathed and babysit children as well as Mom. And the parents were on the catch, gladly took the kids for a while, giving the opportunity for young parents to sleep and spend time together. Time flies imperceptibly. First steps, kindergarten. The children have already gone to the first grade. It was so exciting. Nicholas proudly filmed everything, and Linda cried quietly when Ben and Nancy read poems. The woman was still working in the infectious disease department, and one day an elderly heavy patient was brought in. She was severely poisoned. She wanted to commit suicide and drank a vegetable garden treatment on purpose. They barely saved her. She was on the verge of death for 3 days. Linda had just come on shift and her partner was handing her cases. "We've got a suicidal woman. We had to keep an eye on her. We barely got her out of there, or she'd be up to something else. And then you'll have to answer to us. Let the police and psychologists deal with her." Linda started taking pills and thermometers to the wards and went into room 5. And when the old woman turned her head, she gasped. It was her estranged mother-in-law, Mrs. Helen, but she was simply unrecognizable. Just a shadow, impossible to look at. Linda even wanted to leave. I didn't want to talk to her, but she quickly put her foot down. After all, she is a medic, so she must help everyone without exception. Linda exhaled and said, "Good afternoon. Mrs. Helen, you recognize me, don't you? I can see it in your eyes. Take a thermometer. We're going to take your temperature. What happened to you? Why did you drink the poison? What if it hadn't been pumped out?" Mrs. Helen replied hoarsely, "I might have wished they hadn't. Why would I want a life like that? My son got out on parole and disappeared somewhere, never came home, left his mother. I have a serious, almost fatal illness, and I'm alone. No one to even give me a glass of water. Now that we've met, I want to tell you this. I'm sorry for everything. Did I break up your marriage with Matthew? I always thought you weren't worthy of my son. It wasn't until I was dying that I realized it. It was only then that I realized what I'd done. I beg you to let me see my grandson at least once. Did I hear you have a son with Matthew? I don't have long to live. That's all I ask. I won't hurt anyone else. I swear it." Linda shook her head, sitting down next to me in the chair. "I'm sorry that this happened to you, and I don't hold a grudge. On the contrary, I'm grateful now, I guess. After all, if not for the divorce with your son, I would never have met my soulmate and would not have learnt what is a real woman's happiness. I'm sorry, but I won't be introducing my baby to you. He has a different father, different grandparents, and I'm not going to traumatize him. I can only show you a photo on my phone. There, you see, that's your grandson. And this is Nancy, my daughter. She's a first grader." Mrs. Helen kept staring at the photo. A tear rolled down her cheek. She mumbled, "Wow, he looks just like Matthew when he was a kid. The mole above his eyebrow is the same. And his curls, he's all grown up now." Linda put the phone away, took the thermometer and replied dryly, "I have to go. You get better here." Mrs. Helen pleaded, "Linda, I'm sorry for everything, you old fool. Have mercy on me. Let me hold my grandson before I die." The nurse shook her head in denial and left the room. She was seething with anger and resentment. She decided to remember her grandchildren, I thought. And she herself used to shout that I had a baby. She chased the child out of the house. Serves her right. Now she's paying for all her sins. She told Nicholas and her mum. She rang with outrage. She thought her family would be supportive and understanding, but she was wrong. Mum didn't agree with Linda. "Daughter, I understand. These people have caused you a lot of harm, and you, of course, have the right to cut them out of your life. But look on the bright side. Chill out. Mrs. Helen's been punished enough as it is. She's been abandoned by her own son, and she's gravely, gravely ill. Just think how desperate you'd have to be to commit suicide in such a savage way. Mrs. Helen is her own grandmother, even if she's not the best. It is not necessary to tell the child everything. He is too young to understand the despicable deeds of adults. But it is not difficult to let your grandmother hug your grandson. For you, it will be a huge victory over yourself. Forgiving an enemy is always incredibly difficult. Just a few minutes, and Mrs. Helen will be happy. Think about it." Nicholas said that whatever Linda decides, that's what will happen. And he promised to support her in any way he could. He understood his wife as well as anyone. It was tantamount to being told to take shul and forgive him. There was no way he could do that. Did you have to deal with Mrs. Helen on shift? She never asked her for anything else. She didn't talk at all. She just lay there with her back turned to the wall. She wouldn't eat either. She seemed to really want to die quickly. The doctor lamented, pitied the old woman. She's not fighting at all. The symptoms of the poisoning have, of course, been treated. Now it remains to cure the severe burn of the mucous membrane of the stomach and intestines. But it is obvious that the patient is deeply depressed and does not want to live. She's all alone. It's been a fortnight since anyone's visited her. If this keeps up, we'll have to move her to another ward. We can't do anything. Something in Linda's soul trembled. She thought, what am I, some kind of insensitive log? A man is dying, and I don't even care. Mum's right. It can't be like this. We're human beings. We should be able to forgive and be compassionate. For Mrs. Helen, hours, minutes, and days of the week had long since merged into one. She did not understand why she had been brought back to life, why she had to return to a cold, empty house, where no one was waiting for her and no one needed her. It was simply unbearable. Her grandson was her only family member, but Linda had given up all hope of ever seeing him again. The door to the room opened quietly, but Mrs. Helen didn't even turn her head. She didn't care who was behind that door. Suddenly, she heard a soft child's voice. "Mummy, is this the grandmother we came to see? Is she asleep?" The old woman's heart leapt into her heels. She immediately jumped out of bed, fixing her hair, and kept looking at the cute-cheeked kid in a tracksuit and bright trainers. It was as if she'd seen Matthew's son as a child. Then she held out a dry palm and said, "Hi, mate. Thank you for coming to visit. My name is Grandma Helen." The boy held out the package in embarrassment. "I know my mom told me that when Grandma was sick and sad, so she and I decided to come and visit you. Here are some presents. I know how to cheer you up. I always want to draw when I'm sad or in a bad mood. And Nancy likes to draw too. She and I draw together, and it's a lot more fun. Would you like me to show you a game? I'll start drawing, and you keep drawing, and then I'll do it again, and we'll guess what comes out. It's very funny. My mom taught me." Mrs. Helen could hardly contain her tears of happiness. She wanted to hug her grandson tightly, to kiss him, to hold him close, but she was afraid she would frighten the baby, so she replied cheerfully, "Well, let's try. I'll go first. What does it look like?" They were so engrossed that they didn't even notice an hour had passed. The baby had settled in and was chatting away, asking his new grandmother about everything. "And you are great at drawing. The kitten is so beautiful. Can you bake cakes? Mrs. Rachel's grandmother only knows how to make cottage cheese pancakes. That's what my little sister likes to make. I like cherry pies. Do you want to bring Nancy along next time? She'll cheer you up in no time. She makes these faces. She'll make you laugh." Mrs. Helen answered cheerfully, "I promise. As soon as I'm well enough, I'll make you and your sister cherry pies, and I'll be glad to meet you. So you come and visit me more often. Okay? I'd be very happy to." Linda sat quietly in her chair and realized what a good thing she had done. Mrs. Helen's eyes lit up as if they were alive, and Linda felt better. She asked her former mother-in-law not to tell the child that she was his own grandmother. Let him grow up. He thinks Nicholas is daddy. When he's older, we'll see. In the meantime, let things be as they are. From that day on, Mrs. Helen recovered very quickly. She was so happy every second she spent with her grandson she couldn't breathe. She was soon discharged from hospital. Although the doctors gave her only a couple of months to live with a diagnosis, Mrs. Helen overturned that verdict. The doctors gave up, but the woman still lived and rejoiced every day. After all, now she had a reason to live. Linda thanked her mother for telling her how to do the right thing. The resentment and hatred gradually left her heart. After all the bad things were in the past. She has found her happiness. She has a marvelous husband and 2 wonderful children, and the family is good. And Mrs. Helen's changed a lot. She'd really realized everything and was a very different person now, kind and calm. So why deprive her of the joy of spending time with her grandson? It's ridiculous. Every night, snuggled up to her beloved husband, Linda smiled and fell asleep completely happy.
In the window of a passing train, she saw her husband and daughter. The truth was monstrous. There was a dim light in the old fortune teller's house. It was rumored in the village that the fortune teller had long ago turned 100 years old, but she still did not leave her craft. If the rumors about the centenary were true, the grandmother did not look her age at all. Her eyes were full of life. Her fingers nimbly lit candles and laid out cards. She looked intently at the photograph the night visitor held out to her. It showed a happy family, mom, dad, and daughter. "They're alive." "Alive? Heh heh heh," smiled Grandma after a long silence. "I can see they're alive. And so are you, granddaughter." "You're wrong," Selena shrieked. "I buried them a year ago. I came here to have you confirmed, yes, dead, drowned, lost, so that I could live again. We'll at least try to try. And you're a charlatan, that's what you are." "Alive is alive," Grandma said with a smile. "It's a terrible sin to bury the living. You'll never be able to wash it off, my dear." Her throat tightened with indignation. Her anger seemed to choke her with its fingers. Her shoulders shook with sobs. For a whole year, she could find neither truth nor peace. At that moment, she even raised her hand so that the woman wanted to hit the old woman. But the fortune teller did not kick out the angry guest, but put her hand on Celine's shoulder. "In this village, they say I'm 100 years old," she whispered. "They lie, of course. All people lie. When Grandma Juliana first came here, decades ago, she was already old. In just a few weeks, she had a nice house made of huge logs, a bathhouse for her body, and a small altar for her soul. And then a string of people came here. Some are looking for relatives, others for missing objects, and others for themselves." "I'm sorry," Celine whispered, removing the old woman's hand. "When they were gone, my whole life turned upside down. I feel like I'm in a bad dream all the time, and I can't open my eyes." "Don't apologize, granddaughter," Julienne replied. "I've seen it all. I've seen war, and pestilence, and famine. I've seen parents bury their children. Do you have a gift? The ability to see?" the guest asked. She wanted so much to hope that the old woman was right, but deep down she doubted the truth of her words. She wanted to know more. "No gift," the witch doctor exhaled. The late-night conversation was beginning to wear her down. "You see bodies, and I see corporeal ones beneath them. They shuttle between us, swarming, not like flies, but like birds, or like clouds. Are they spirits? Ghosts?" whispered Celine in horror. "You say spirits?" the grandmother replied. "I say helpers. What makes you think they're alive? They've been searching for them. Not for 3 days, not for a week, but for a month. I looked for them myself, personally. I looked everywhere. I looked at everything, my God, everything. It was so scary. And you just looked at the photo and you saw it. How is that possible?" The grandmother sighed. She was beginning to lose patience, which is rare at her age. "How do you explain to a blind person what the sun looks like? You can describe the shape, color, warmth, but it would still be a pale shadow of what the sun really looks like." As soon as she looked at the photo, she saw the whole picture. Deception, betrayal, and true love. "I'm not 100 years old, granddaughter," yawned the fortune teller. "I'm not 100, no." "Please help me," Selena whispered. "Help me. I'll owe you for the rest of my life." "How would it quite help, eh?" Grandmother Juliana suddenly laughed in a hoarse voice, and her laughter made the guest feel frightened. She was reminded of the old women who used to scare naughty children. They invite you into their house, but there is no way out. Selena jumped up and rushed to the door. The sudden movement extinguished the candles, and the room was plunged into darkness. The guest ran through the old woman's house, fumbled for the entrance to the corridor, and it was a long line. She kept running, fumbling with her hands on the walls in search of a handle. But no, only the endless surface, the relief of the huge timbers of which the walls are made. Suddenly a candle was lit in the distance, like a lone star in the sky. The guest obediently returned to her grandmother, her table, and the maps. "How long are you going to run around?" the fortune teller asked sternly. "You'll scare away all my helpers. Don't think you're the only one who's scared. The helpers can sense things too. And worry, you're scaring them, granddaughter, scaring them. It's not good." Selena's hands went cold. It seemed to her that she would never get out of this terrible house, where she had come of her own free will. She would wander in the dark, looking for a way out, or maybe Juliana's grandmother had other plans for her. The old woman kept smiling, and the sight of it sent chills down her spine. "I'm sorry," the guest whispered. "I apologize for calling you a quack. You're not like that, no. You're the real thing, the real thing." "A witch?" the fortune teller said, and then she moved as sharply as if she'd flown across the table. Selena could have sworn that the old woman's face moved toward her separately from her body. Even so, the guest replied defiantly, "I don't care who I go to anymore. I just want to know the truth, and I don't need anything else." "So I'm telling you the truth," Julianne sighed. "Your husband and your daughter are alive. But the truth, you won't like the truth. The truth will disappoint you, granddaughter." The fog was suddenly gone. Selena looked at her phone. 2 o'clock in the morning. In front of her is a tired grandmother who was old before she even came to this village. And her, Selena, with her eternal skepticism. If she wasn't ready to believe the fortune teller, why did she come? Why had she waited her turn in the gazebo for days? She certainly didn't have an answer to those questions. "You shouldn't have buried them," Julian said. "I shouldn't have. It's a great sin, granddaughter." "How do you know?" Selena wondered. "I didn't say that. I see that the coffins are standing, and the wreaths and lamps have been lit," the fortune teller explained. "But the coffins are empty, and the earth does not accept them." Selena thought her grandmother had a rare gift indeed. That spring, when she had received the death certificates and organized the funeral for her husband and daughter, the ground was really frozen and couldn't be dug up. The ceremony was strange and long. She had never been to the cemetery since then because she didn't believe in it. "What am I to do?" she pondered, wiping away her tears. "If I leave everything as it is, I'll be tormented. And if I start looking, will I be disappointed?" "Better disappointed than agonized," Julian smiled, the demonic light glinting in the corners of her eyes again. "Because the truth is very interesting." "Where do I look for them, grandmother?" Selene asked, wiping away her tears. "I'll tell you all about it," nodded the old woman. To the guest's surprise, all the old woman's teeth were in place. "Go to the station." And as Selene listened to the woman, the hairs on her head stood up. Every expensive hotel has its own fragrance, which should evoke the most pleasant associations with the place. A clock that shows the time in different time zones is a must. This way, the value of the place is immediately increased. And also fresh apples or candy at the reception desk to make the guest feel at home. The hotel, where a handsome man and a little girl entered, had all the trappings of hospitality. "Good afternoon," he said with a slight accent. "We booked a room. I'm not sure I filled in all the fields on the website correctly." "Oh, that American language. What's your name?" the girl at the counter asked helpfully. "Nicholas," the man replied with a smile. "Nicholas Crass. I am traveling with my daughter." "Let me see. Yes, Mr. Nicholas, the registration is valid. Welcome to our hotel. Are you Austrian?" the hotel employee asked with interest. "Oh no, not at all." Nicholas waved his hand. "We're ethnic Americans. We live in the Czech Republic now. I have a small business there." "What brings one to the US?" the woman wondered. "Oh, unfinished business," the stranger explained. "You know, life is so interesting you have to keep looking back. It's useful. Only then you realize that time has passed, and if you don't look back, it will have been wasted." The woman stood with her mouth open. The guest literally charmed her. Such a caring and intelligent man, traveling all alone with a little girl. She looked to be about 6 years old at most. She wanted so much to talk to the stranger some more, to have a cup of coffee or better, a glass of wine. It was as if he read her thoughts, moved as close as the counter allowed, and said confidentially, "Maria usually falls asleep around 10 o'clock at night. Knock on my door twice. I'll come out and we'll take a walk. Maybe show me your hotel, or your soul. You have such deep eyes. I can tell you're a wonderful person." The hotel employee blushed. It seemed she had never been complimented in her life, especially such nice men. Such, but ethnically American, with his own little business. Maybe there would be a job for her, too. On the one hand, she adored New York, her hometown. On the other hand, she wanted to see the world, or at least Europe. "You know," the girl whispered, "my name is Barbara. Just Barbara to my friends." He only smiled in response. It seemed that the guest was doing it out of politeness, but it turned out to be very warmly European. But his eyes, they had the same dark color as the winter forest that came up close to the hotel on one side, and just as cold. As if he had nothing to do with her warm laughter. She felt like she should say something, but she couldn't find the words. "Here's the card," Barbara said. "Your room, with a crib." Just as you ordered. You're on the 3rd floor, Mr. Nicholas. Thank you very much, he replied in a deep, clear voice. It's so nice to be back in the motherland. I adore the United States. Nowhere else in the world are there such charming women and such hard workers. In the commotion, she had completely forgotten to ask Nicholas for his passport. The rules were strict now. The data a guest gave during electronic registration had to be checked and immediately forwarded to the police. But for some reason, she couldn't bring herself to call the man. She'd better go to him at 9 o'clock at night and remind him about the documents. Nicholas was already walking away, holding the hand of his little daughter. They had only one small suitcase on wheels. Barbara almost decided to call the man under some plausible pretext. But then several guests came to the counter, a whole group of travelers. They were back in their hometown. He ordered dinner directly to the room and didn't want to go outside. As the girl fell asleep, there was a knock at the door. He was not mistaken. The porter with the beautiful name of Barbara could not resist his charms. "I've been waiting for you," he said in a voice that made her want to throw herself into his arms. "All my life?" Barbara asked hopefully. "Yes," Nicholas whispered and kissed her gently on the cheek. The best acquaintances are always casual. "You won't have a problem spending some time with me, will you?" "No," the girl smiled. "I've already changed. I can do whatever I want." "I'm glad I met you too, Nicholas." "Please, Barbara," asked the American Setch. "Let's use the first name. I feel like I've known you all my life." Had she known how this encounter would end, she wouldn't have hesitated to rush back behind the counter. "This is crazy. Real crazy," Selena thought as she stood on the platform. Along with the pre-dawn mist, the magic had dissolved, and the inconsolable widow suddenly realized what foolishness she had wasted a whole week of her life on, along with the crumbs of her last money. First, she had taken a bus to Washington, and then spent 24 hours on a train. Then she hitchhiked to the village where Grandma Juliana lived, the legendary Grandma Juliana. After 2 days of waiting, the old woman finally deigned to receive her deep into the night. By this time, Celine's back ached, because for 2 days in a row, she had to sleep in the gazebo on some ridiculous tourist mat. There was not just a line for Julian, but a pilgrimage. "You're lucky," the young man who had set up a tent on the property told her. "I've been waiting for 2 weeks, and I may have to spend another month here." "What are you waiting for?" asked Celine. "I want to learn," the boy replied. "I have a gift." "Do you want me to tell you about you? Your name is Selena, you're from New York." "Well, let's just say I told you that yesterday." "Good," nodded the pilgrim. "You came here to find the killer, but we both know that the real killer is you." The strange guide who discovered the gift of clairvoyance stayed in the tent, and the inconsolable widow had the strangest night of her life. These events now seemed like a dream. Could something like this really happen? Deep down, Selena knew she had to get her head on straight, that since she had suffered such grief, she had to move on. There were still no options. "I must live," the woman said, "to live for myself and for the memory of them. But is that possible now?" The most surprising thing is that Selena, who has been interested in magic and esotericism all her life, had never even heard of Grandma Juliana. But she clung to her as her last hope to make sense of the misfortune that had befallen her family. During the reception, it had indeed seemed to her that the old woman possessed fantastic powers. But now, in the selenium of the day, everything that had happened was doubtful. At the psychic's behest, she must go to the place where the whole story had spun from, to her hometown, where Selena had met the love of her life, experienced the joy of motherhood, and then the grief of loss. Although it had been over a year since she lost Maria and Michael, the wounds in her soul were taking their time to heal. Who knew that an ordinary vacation trip to Chicago would turn into such a terrible tragedy? It was all Michael's fault. He couldn't sit still in one place. He was in some kind of permanent movement, always ready to go somewhere, to do something and create. Why didn't I go with them? The woman questioned. Why didn't I go missing too? Selena couldn't make sense of her feelings and couldn't figure out whether she missed her husband or her daughter more. Probably both. In the days of her misfortune, she dropped everything and flew to Chicago. She traveled to every hospital, cemetery and morgue, visited dozens of offices. It seems that for the month that she spent by the sea, not even once did not even sleep a wink. All in vain. Michael and Maria had vanished into thin air. Why should she go back to New York? Only recently Selena had fled from this city on the Neva in shame and despair. In her heart she realized Michael was gone and so was Maria. Along with them, her quiet life and sleep and rest flew away. The search required a lot of money. She had to mortgage the apartment. This sum was spent on private detectives, lawyers, clairvoyants, all in vain. She couldn't show herself to her parents either. Her mother still blamed her for letting her granddaughter go on vacation alone with her father. Who knew you could disappear without a trace in Chicago? But there was one thing that did give her hope. After all, neither husband nor daughter's bodies were ever found, which means they might have survived, so there's still a chance. The car Michael had rented before he died had its front windows open. He must have fought to the last man, Celine thought. What a man! If they had left the car, they might have survived. After the incident, she was horrified to learn that such stories of cars being swept out to sea were not uncommon. She just never thought something like this could happen to her family. Until the last moment, she believed in the best. At the provincial train station, she saw the same guy who had spent so many days in a tent waiting for an audience. Selena turned away, but he had already spotted her and started waving. He ran up, despite his weighty backpack. "Hello," he said. "What, are you coming back?" "Yes," Selena nodded. "I'd like to be alone." "Can you imagine what my grandmother said?" The boy continued, ignoring her words. "She says I don't have any powers." "You quack. Probably just afraid of competition." "What did she tell you?" "It's nothing," Celine replied and waved her hand. She still hoped that Michael had simply lost his memory and that Maria was too young to tell her anything about herself, and that they would meet again. Her mind told her to just accept the loss and move on with her life. She was still young. She could still have a new family, children. But the pain of loss seemed unbearable. Almost all the way to DC, she was entertained by this strange guy, talking about how he'd felt different since he was a kid, that people didn't understand him and were afraid of him, that he could read minds and see the future through his hands and eyes. Selena even agreed to let him read her fortune for that he had to sit on the side, and a few stations before Washington. "A vision," he said suddenly, and the guy's eyes really did turn glassy. "Seeing your world changing. How what you think is true becomes a dream. An officer with gold epaulets comes out of a glass door and takes you prisoner." Selena laughed, so amused by this performance. Her grandmother had been right. The traveling companion had no powers. "What's his name, by the way?" Waking up, the boy pretended to be very confused. He gathered his things, threw a huge backpack on his shoulders, and jumped out of the train. Selena smiled even wider. It wasn't until she got off at the train station in Washington, D.C., that she suddenly realized why this young psychic had decided to run away. And the realization of the truth made her want to cry. For the fourth day in a row, Barbara flew with happiness. She'd never left the walls of her home hotel. Why should she go home when she had a family of her own, almost her own? After all, in her 30s, she was not even married. Even a serious relationship seemed fantastic to her. Maybe it had something to do with her temperament. Barbara did not know how to demand or even ask, but could only hint. Maybe her loneliness was due to her work. 12-hour shifts completely deprived her of strength. And of course, one could always meet an interesting man for a one-night stand in a hotel. At first, she thought it was something shameful, but then she accepted it. After all, a fleeting relationship is better than no relationship at all. Still, her soul was still dreaming, if not of a prince, then at least of an interesting man who would take her away. It's impossible to have a relationship in this city, Barbara complained to her friends. Everyone is married, a drug addict, a gambler, or a cheapskate. I don't know which is worse. They just shrugged their shoulders. Everyone she had studied with years ago at the hospitality college had husbands and children. And some even had second circle families. And only Barbara had had no luck on the love front, with only setbacks and defeats. Now that was about to change. Nicholas turned out to be a terrific man, intelligent, caring, well-read. It's as if he came from another reality. His daughter was incredibly well-mannered and polite. She dressed herself, washed her own clothes, and generally behaved much older than her 6 years. On the second day, Barbara replaced her new family's room, taking advantage of her opportunities. Nicholas was now living in an apartment with 2 rooms for the same money, and in one of them, they could spend the night together without the risk of embarrassing the girl. Barbara had to leave the room at 6 in the morning so that no one would notice them together. The hotel used to have its own security service, but the coronavirus and the tourism crisis that followed had forced the management to cut costs. Barbara knew the cameras on the floor were just for show, so she wasn't afraid of being exposed. Harry, a hotel owner in historic New York City, upon learning of the affair, would describe her behavior this way. This is inconsistent with the high standards of our institution. It is unacceptable to engage with customers. On the other hand, if the guest made the first move, you should have politely declined or quit the hotel. Barbara could hear her boss's voice in her head. Luckily, Harry was visiting his brainchild less and less often and was busy with other projects. The other employees, if they noticed Varia's unusual activity, didn't pay much attention. And who would judge her? Sophia, her replacement, who, because of the frenzied pace of work, also had a troubled personal life. Or the cooks and bartenders, who were changing at an unbelievable rate. The main question on Barbara's mind was how long this fairy tale would last. Would Nicholas take her with him to the Czech Republic? Or would he buy an apartment here, move in, and the 3 of them would live together like a real family? When she had a day off, she decided to give Nicholas and his daughter a tour of New York. She took them through the streets of the city. They saw the Statue of Liberty. "Here, it's the Statue of Liberty," she said. Then she showed them her favorite places, not the parade routes that tourists often take. Her favorite canteen, where she could taste wonderful food without paying a lot of money. I wanted to show him the room I rented with my girlfriend, but I was afraid. What if he liked it better? Nicholas was gorgeous, and she fell in love like she'd never fallen in love before. But his eyes, there was a sadness in them, a tragedy, and every day Barbara was closer to finding it. The girl sometimes withdrew into herself, and when she called to her, there were tears in the children's eyes. Nicholas, when Barbara had once casually said something about Mary's mother, had gotten all tense and asked to change the subject. It was obvious that the charming Czech didn't have a wife. At least not now. Of course, Barbara would have liked to know the truth, but curiosity wasn't that strong. If it's a family secret, if it's not customary to talk about it, let it be. Someday they'll tell it themselves. The young woman was more interested in another matter. Sooner or later Nicholas would finish his business in the United States, and then what? It was necessary to hint that she might be useful in Europe. She was learning German and French. She could take care of the girl while he was at work. But having this conversation and getting over herself seemed unrealistic. How could she get over herself? How to transcend this natural modesty that almost broke her life? In the evening, when Nicholas had put the girl to bed, he went outside to see her. The 2 of them walked to the coffee shop next door and got themselves drinks. How long had it been since Barbara had been home? Or was her home now not where she thought it was at all? The conversation, the sweet compliments, and little caresses went on for a very long time. I think Maria has already fully accepted me, stretched out Barbara, blushing. Where to? Wondered Nicholas. To the family. To your family? The girl whispered and closed her eyes in embarrassment. Oh, you're so good, the man said, hugged her tightly and kissed her. Of course she did. She's had such a hard time dealing with the loss. Please never, ever remind her about her mother. It's a sore subject with us. Forbidden. During the next walk, he bought her a beautiful and expensive scarf. She had never worn anything like it, of course, but she put it on immediately to please the man. Nicholas gave her a charming smile. Barbara, he said, I have a proposition for you. It may sound strange, but listen to the end of it. The young woman brightened. She knew that Europeans were quick to make decisions, but was she really that quick? No, she would not take his last name. She would keep her own, but their future children. I'm all ears, whispered the young woman. Barbara, just listen to the end, okay? Nicholas continued. Maria and I are in trouble, and we're going to do something that's going to get us out of this cycle of bad luck. You have to, As the man recounted his plan, his new poster felt more and more like the heroine of a spy movie, a real thriller. The request for help caused Barbara some apprehension, and she even thought of refusing at first. However, if he would really take her with him to Europe, it could be a risk. An interrogator sounds proud, much better than a district inspector or an internal duty officer. Despite the proud title, Alston hated his current job. All day long, he spent his days circling New York City, conducting pointless interviews with people, and making equally useless rulings. He was in his 30s, captain stars falling on his shoulders, but there was no promotion. It was his own fault. He himself had chosen the dusty job of interrogation, which was dominated by meaningless and useless labor. A man died in the street. His heart stopped. He had to check if a crime had been committed. Even if he was already 90 years old, even if he was a regular at the cardiologist, a man chokes at home in front of witnesses, and the expert confirms it. Do me a favor, interview everyone involved, including neighbors. Even if the medical examiner swears there are 2 cases a week in his neighborhood. A woman with a broken nose went to the hospital. Quickly run to her home. Question her about whether she suffers from domestic violence. Checks, rulings, orders. And it would be fine if the duties of the inquirer would end there. But no. At least once a week, he had to be on duty at some event or concert to keep order while the rest of us rested. He wistfully remembered the coronavirus when there was no crime or public events. At least once a week, stand in convoy in court. An interrogator had no life, just a job. The only thing that could cheer Alston up at all was an interesting case. He'd had a few of those in his career, but not very often. Usually he felt that some trivial assignment was in danger of turning into something worthwhile. But even then, alas, there were limits. As soon as you come up with an interesting crime, the material will be immediately taken away from you, either by the investigation or by the prosecutor's office. They need it more. Alston, the boss, walked into the office without knocking. Drop everything, there's an urgent errand to run. Alston adjusted his glasses, a gesture he used deliberately to keep from saying too much. If he did, his bonus would be forfeited, and his meager salary would become a pittance. There was no work in the inquest except urgent work. The ruling he was typing now should have been issued 3 days ago. And the answer still had to be coordinated with the head of the line department. That's right, Alston replied. I'll just print out the ruling, or the prosecutor's office will send us another happy letter. What have you got there? The supervisor asked, peering unceremoniously into the monitor. Oh yes, the accident. Your accident can wait, Alston. Look where the assignment came from. Right there. The colonel proudly pointed to the envelope and the document. The three-letter abbreviation, which the police preferred not to say aloud, inspired respect. But if this assignment was sent down to their level, it means that there can't be anything alive there. It was just another response and a useless check. All right, Austin nodded. I'll send the resolution later. But, Comrade Colonel, if anything happens, I'll blame you. If there are any problems with the ruling, no more bickering, said the chief. You see what kind of cases I'm assigning you. Not just anything, but insurance fraud. Do you have any idea what that is? Austin adjusted his glasses again. For some reason, the colonel considered everyone below him in rank and position to be feeble-minded. The trouble was that Austin really liked his profession, except that he wanted to investigate more than accidental deaths and age-related deaths, where everything was clear. Insurance? The interrogator interjected. There's even a separate article in our code for this. Well done. I never doubted you, said the colonel. Pay attention. Secret. That's how much I trust you. Don't show anyone either the assignment itself or what you dig up. Sign here in the journal. Your deadline is 3 days. When the chief left the office, Austin decided to finish writing the resolution. He printed it out and took it to the clerk's office. Here in the department, any documents had to be transmitted only through trained people. Then he returned to the order. I read the dry text. In principle, the task could be accomplished not only in a day, but in 5 minutes, without leaving the office. But how do they write? Dry, bureaucratic language. Austin read aloud the fragment that was the worst perceived. As a result of the investigation of illegal activities of insurance companies, the senior investigator of the investigation department found. So, investigation. The interests of the widow of Nicholas Mertz are represented by a lawyer with an expired license. The beneficiary must be thoroughly interviewed, and it must be ascertained that his application was valid. In fact, all he has to do is make a report of the interrogation of one single person. And since the investigator assigned it to the district inquiry, there's really nothing to catch. The woman must have been searched for, but either not found or she refused to go somewhere and explain anything. But what language, motherfucker? Who is a beneficiary? The inquirer thought. Someone who gains a benefit. Then why not write widow? Austin knew the answer to that question very well. Whoever had drafted the document wanted to appear very clever, so that the executor would have to type a new word into Google to find out its meaning. The whole query was full of just such turns that could be simplified. This is the trademark style of those who want to appear smarter than they really are. What happened to her husband? The inquirer said aloud. He found a ruling in the database. There was a whole investigative team working on it. It turns out that the arrogant Nicholas Mertz, ignoring the warning of the storm, went with his daughter to some tourist site in Chicago. Both were washed out to sea. What a drama! The coroner imagined he was the one assigned to investigate such a case. In a separate file, Austin typed the surnames, first names, and patronymics of all the people involved and entered them into a table. It appeared that Selena had been left all alone after the tragic accident. She used to be registered in their neighborhood, but now, according to the real estate database, the woman had gotten rid of the apartment. She must have changed her cell phone, and she certainly wouldn't want to talk to some interrogator and spill her guts about how she'd hired a lawyer with an expired license. Nicholas Mertz was a strange man too. Shortly before his marriage, he had changed his last name for something. He used to be Kearns. Paradoxically, neither the first nor the second name in the databases had nothing at all. No cell phone, no driver's license, no employment records, no medical records. It was as if he didn't even exist. Very interesting, Austin said aloud and continued his search. So, this Mertz was born in Berlin, but under the third name Ivanov. This was evident from the information about his parents. They must have served in the Soviet army and been sent to Germany. The lucky ones. Who would now remember that Soviet soldiers had left the center of Europe a little over 30 years ago? This same Nicholas must have somehow managed to stay in Germany. Maybe his mother was an ethnic German. There were no answers, but the story fascinated him. Anyway, he found his death in the United States. Austin was already preparing to write a report that it was impossible to establish Selena Litkina's whereabouts. She had been evicted from her apartment. Her neighbors did not know her new phone number. She had no relatives in the USA. But as soon as he dialed the phone, there were long beeps in the receiver, and when a woman's voice answered, Austin was even a little confused. The train was already approaching the Washington station, when suddenly, where had her wallet disappeared to? She was sure to take it out and put the ticket in there. Robbed, Selena shouted, wiping away her tears. They took the last of the money. She was consoled by the conductor and a fellow traveler, giving her advice. In the purse that the psychic had stolen, there were credit cards already useless, discount cards, and $300 was the rest of her finances. What's she gonna do now? Good thing she'd stashed one bill. Nothing is nothing, the conductor said, putting her hand on the girl's shoulder. We'll get off at once and write a statement. We'll find this bastard. We'll find him, that's for sure. I've already buried my family, the girl wailed. And now this. There is no justice on earth. After getting off the train, the woman actually walked towards the police room. But something made her freeze. Standing on the platform of the station, Selena realized with horror that madness was coming to her. How else to explain that in the window of the train, which was about to move, she saw Maria. The girl stood with her face pressed against the glass, looking at something on the platform. If it was a ghost, it was a very strange one. Because Maria was much older than the girl she remembered. Selena sobbed, covering her eyes with her hand. Now she would see her daughter everywhere. She would go completely insane, and she would never be able to go back to normal. She should never have gone to that fortune teller. Madness is contagious. Once you touch it, you'll come back again and again. The old woman must have behaved in such a way that she would come back again and again to spend the night in the gazebo, lying on the mat. The woman looked up. The vision had only worsened. Now Michael was standing beside Maria, also looking at the platform. This ghost had changed a little too, a different hair color. When they lived together, her husband asked her to call him Peter in the European manner, which amused Selena. They loved each other so much. She wanted to push the fog away from her, but it wouldn't go away. Tears filled her eyes. The horn sounded and the train started, picking up speed. Maria and Michael's ghosts were leaving for New York on the Sapsan. Selena changed her mind about going to the police station, and since she had almost no money left, she had to buy the cheapest ticket on a regular train, the one that takes forever to move and stops wherever it goes. That solved another problem though. She'd arrive early in the morning and could walk around all day before returning to her parents' house. Call. Interrogator Austin, line division, said a man's voice. Am I speaking to Selena Litkin? Yes, the woman replied. My purse was stolen, but I didn't report it. The conductor must have told you. You stole a wallet? The interviewer was surprised. Then go to the nearest police station immediately. I can take care of it myself. Selena cut her off. What are you calling about? You see, said the policeman, I have an important errand to run, and I need to question you. Are you ever in New York? Yes, Selena answered, trying to speak calmly. I actually live there. The thing is that in the database the apartment is registered to another person, the interrogator said. That's why I thought you had moved. It's not the only apartment, Selena said. So what did you want? She liked the policeman's voice, so deep and raspy. It could only belong to a very brave man. Could you visit me today? He asked. I'll be there until 8 o'clock this evening, but I can stay longer than that. Let's do it tomorrow, Selena suggested. First thing in the morning. Dictate an address. For some reason, her mood improved. The woman wanted to meet this interrogator with a beautiful voice, to go somewhere with him. Probably, if such a man were around, she would never have had her phone stolen in her life. Washington was still herself, a gloomy, bustling, and unfriendly city. There was no room for love, tenderness, or romance, if it weren't for death. Their relationship had long since reached an impasse, a dead end from which there was no escape, no return. She knew it, but there was nothing she could do about it. Selena kept putting off a serious conversation, and then it was too late. Michael was gone, though her heart refused to accept it and kept insisting that he was alive. Nicholas was secretly proud of himself. His ability to improvise always allowed him to solve the most difficult problems. And now, going to New York from the Czech Republic, he only in general terms imagined how to take the money. His own money, by the way, earned in a relatively honest way. But as he got closer to his goal, the plan became clearer and clearer. Man has no path, there is only a goal, he told himself. Alas, there was no one to share his criminal achievements with. All hope on the charming Maria, who was growing up next to him. Yes, he would definitely be able to teach her his craft. For that, she would have to learn and understand a lot. He'd like her to be involved in operations where there's little risk. Otherwise, she'd get addicted to adrenaline like he did, and then she wouldn't be able to do without it. Yesterday he was Peter, and before that Archie, and before that Victor. But the last time, faking his own death was harder. Yes, he wanted to leave Selena. He was sick and tired of her. But what about Maria? It wasn't the girl's fault. He wanted to take his daughter with him. The plan was complex, daring and risky, and so it worked. For the whole world, they were dead. Of course, he should have done it earlier, when Maria was 2. He was getting too many questions about her mom. The girl at first refused to believe that Celine had betrayed them. But in time, he convinced the child. Besides, the girl liked traveling, flying on the plane, and she didn't have to strain herself to get into character. Nicholas noticed that with a child, documents are not checked as carefully as if he was traveling alone. Now the final push and the big score was in their pocket. Sometimes it happens that fate itself puts signs in your path. You just have to look at them and take them for yourself. And yesterday, as soon as he saw a pretty woman, tactfully called a girl, at the reception desk, he realized that it was fate. She looked too much like her. Did he love Selena? Initially, he needed her for another scam that would only be conquered by a family man. Then he made the mistake of getting too deep into the role. But everything went even better than desired. Not only pulled off the case, but also became a happy father. So fate sent him Barbara like it did Selena. A beautiful, intelligent, gentle girl. Also shy and modest. The kind that fell in love with him especially quickly. We'll have to use it, Nicholas thought. And then, well then what? Throw it away, trample it, erase it from my memory. Austin had a great memory for faces. If he saw a person once, he could easily find him in a crowd. The main thing was to remember when and for what purpose the person was needed. The inquirer liked to go to work on foot, all the more so because the department was not far from the room that had become his temporary shelter 5 years ago, and then became permanent. Walking not only saved some of his modest salary, one could enjoy the sights of New York. This beautiful and gloomy city was one of his greatest affections. Today's story was still on his mind. What a villainous fate, so ruthlessly dealt with a handsome man and a girl. Walking home past the seafront, in front of the popular hotel with the poetic name North Wind, Austin saw an idyllic picture. At a table sat, as it seemed to him, a couple in love. Except, where had he seen the man's face? The interrogator stopped to get a better look at the family. He had to cross the road. I have so much to do, Austin thought. I have to run this stupid errand, and then I have to do the inspections over and over again. But he crossed the road anyway. Coffee cost a fortune in a place like this, but cigarettes were the same price as in the store. The pack of his favorite brand was running out, so he decided to do something useful, both to buy cigarettes and to satisfy his curiosity. But when Austin approached, he saw something amazing and couldn't believe his eyes. And he was glad he wasn't wearing a police uniform. "I'll get her out," the interrogator thought, pulling out his cell phone. Luckily, it was the cell phone he'd used to call Selena. The call went off. Trying not to give away his excitement, Austin stared at the woman beside the man he had identified without error, Nicholas Mertz. Strange man, Celine thought. They seemed to have agreed that she would visit the department early in the morning, but a few hours later, Austin dialed her again around 10 o'clock at night while she was shaking in a train car and asking some stupid questions. Now his voice wasn't so appealing anymore. The policeman, on the other hand, was waiting for his guest the way something very good waits. Interrogators are always at the bottom of the law enforcement hierarchy. Austin had heard condescending remarks directed at him so often over the years that he should have gotten used to them, but not this time. Fate gave him a unique chance to prove that he was worth something too, or maybe a step higher. Suddenly, the door opened without knocking. I'm probably at a bad time. At the threshold of the office stood a woman who was still quite young and pretty. According to the instructions, everyone who comes to the office must be noted by the inspector on duty. Clarify the purpose of the visit and call the calling party. Apparently, Celine had managed to get in unnoticed. "Come in," he said to his guest. "Have a seat." "What do I owe you?" she asked. "Not only did you called twice. I'm very intrigued by you." Instead of answering, Austin pulled out his phone, on which he took several pictures of Nicholas, or whatever his name is, with his family. Zoomed in on the face of the woman with the scarf. Looked like Selena, but definitely not her. Or was this all a con man's cunning plan? Austin didn't trust anyone. "Tell me, please," the interrogator began. "Where is your husband now?" The guest's face turned crimson. She seemed angry, but she held back. Then hope flashed in her eyes. Then distrust. The silence lengthened, but Austin decided not to break it. How else would he get this lady to come clean? "I don't know," Selena exhaled. "I buried him over a year ago." But the coffin was empty. They say his car was swept out to sea by a wave. Patience ran out, and the guest began to sob. She wailed so much that Alex looked in from the next room to make sure no one needed help. Austin made a gesture with his hand. "Got away." The guest calmed down. "So you haven't seen your spouse since the day he went missing?" The police officer continued his inquiry. At that moment, Selena's anger reappeared on her face. She jumped up from her chair, ran right up to Austin, and blasted him in the face. I knew, of course, that not the most intellectually gifted people go into the service. But this, I couldn't have imagined it. My husband is missing, along with my little girl. Your colleagues investigated the case. Wasn't it hard to ask for the files? Austin adjusted his glasses. It was hard for him to keep a nonchalant expression on his face, but it was worth it. He was trying to figure out if it was possible to play that kind of emotion. Probably not. "I requested it," the inquirer replied. "The case is still open." "Then why all these silly questions?" the woman shouted. "To make me suffer." At this point, the interrogator realized that the exegesis could be stopped. If she was acting, she was very talented. But most likely, Selena really didn't know anything about her husband's fate. Besides, the policeman really wanted to brag about his talents and luck. After all, how else to explain his fantastic luck? "I believe your spouse survived," the interrogator said in a nonchalant tone. "Really?" the woman asked hopefully and wiped away her tears. "But why? Why do you think so?" "Because I found it," Austin smiled and held out his phone to her. "Here, look." Selena looked at the screen and the world around her swam. It was a good thing she was sitting up, or she would have collapsed to the ground. She easily recognized Nicholas, her pet, though his appearance had changed a bit. Though his hair was new and his nose looked a little longer, it was him. The oval of his face, his eyes, his mouth, the same one who had complimented her relentlessly and swore eternal love. "It can't be," whispered Celine. "It can't be. And you don't recognize this woman?" the interrogator asked. He zoomed in on the screen in front of the stranger's face. She didn't even catch Selena's eye right away. There was a woman looking at her from the screen who reminded her of someone. Who? White hair, red-rimmed glasses. Oh, that's... Oh my God! Selena wondered, wiping her hair. "It's me, isn't it? I mean, she looks like me. It can't be. This lady must have kidnapped them. She's pretending to be me, playing me for a fool. We need to apprehend her now. You need to apprehend her now. I'll prove that I'm the real Selena." The interrogator coughed and adjusted his glasses. On the one hand, he wanted to laugh. On the other, he had to keep his temper in check. He had almost solved the crime that would finally get his career off the ground. It was a string of atrocities. "I have some bad news for you, Selena," Austin exhaled. "Your ex-husband is not who he says he is. He's a talented con man." "No," replied the visitor. "It's a mistake. It's an accident. Come on, arrest this woman. Arrest her immediately. You can see she's a divorcee." "Understand, I am a simple interrogator," the policeman said. "Of course, I have no experience in investigating such cases, but I doubt your word very much. All indications are that Peter Mertz is the real liar here. By the way, he has a different name now." The guest began to sob again. The interrogator was surprised at her reserve of emotions. He himself could not have reacted so violently to such news. Of course, he should have drawn up a protocol of interrogation, a report, recorded the photo on disk, and sent it all to the investigation as soon as possible. Better yet, detain Peter. "I don't understand anything anymore," the woman said. "And by the way, I have deceived you. I have absolutely nowhere to stay in St. Petersburg. I have no apartment anymore." "Here's what we'll do, Celine," Austin said after a brief thought. His plan wasn't flawless, of course, but it seemed reasonable. For the first time since Michael's disappearance, she felt interested in and attracted to a man. His proposal made Selena blush, and she thought that she could hardly hold herself back. Selena heard a drunken voice from down the long hallway. "He's brought a woman, finally." "Never mind," Austin said, showing her the direction. "That's right, the locals. That's right. Pay no attention, beautiful stranger," shouted the drunken man. "Pashka, well done, way to go." The interrogator blushed thickly. He rented a room in a relic of a bygone era. Selena looked with interest at one of the last of the St. Petersburg communal houses. High ceilings, carved windows, moldings and peeling putty, and skeins of wires running along the walls, and the musty smell of a room that needs to be renovated, but is easier to tear down. "I'm still lucky," Austin smiled as they walked in. "There's no mold in my room. Make yourself comfortable." Selena looked around. Finding a spare seat in this room was no easy task. There was a couch along the longest wall. Opposite it was an old closet. The rest of the room was occupied by a desk with a computer and some sort of kitchenette. Both the floor and the glass had not been cleaned for a long time. Austin blushed even more as he intercepted his guest's gaze, who was scrutinizing the dirt and grease. "It's just temporary," he said. "Here, I'm taking it off until they give me a work permit." "How long has it been out?" Selena asked out of politeness. "It's been 6 years," shrugged the interrogator. "How do we do it?" "First it's the cops, then family." "What, they don't give it at all?" asked the guest. "No," Austin answered and blushed again. Is it still about the apartments? She smiled. It was a weak joke, but it was something. Selena looked at the policeman because there was nothing else to look at. A good-looking man, neat and intelligent. It must be hard for him to work in the police force. Can't even get a decent apartment. I wish he had a wife. I'm sorry for the details, but I'm after the road, Selena said. I need to wash up. Come on, I'll walk you out, the policeman offered. We've got an old house here, and there's no chance of anything happening. In the communal room, there was a large kitchen block, and just behind it were showers and toilets. It was possible to wash behind a curtain with no doors or latches. She was a little embarrassed, but she still had no choice. The last time she had washed herself properly was 3 days ago at a roadside inn. I could get a room, Selena said timidly, if I'm embarrassing you. No, not at all, replied the policeman. Don't worry, I'll turn around. Besides, you can't see anything through the curtain anyway. In fact, Selena couldn't get a room. The money had been stolen, and the remaining sum wouldn't even be enough for a bed in a hostel. She couldn't even think of what to do next. She couldn't pay back the loan after she mortgaged the property. Go back to her parents. No, we need to get to the bottom of this whole story first. Is her daughter really alive? Selena turned on the water. The faucet made a sound like devils howling from the underworld. She remembered the mysterious visit to the fortune teller, after which she had decided to return to New York. Her grandmother Julianne had been right. Was it luck, coincidence, or a secret gift? The water from the faucet was barely warm, but Selena still felt pleasure. She was washing away not only the dirt, but also the past. Soon she would get her daughter back, find answers to all her questions, and live happily ever after. I wonder, Selena thought, is that man looking at me through the curtain, staring? There was no mirror here, but she realized that she looked good. Constant movement and lack of appetite had given her back her slim figure. She had naturally nice hips and neat breasts. And a pretty face too. Perhaps this flushed policeman could solve one more of her problems, not just give her a place to sleep. Austin, Selena said, peeking out from behind the curtain, pass me a towel. The interrogator glanced at her, adjusted his glasses, and blushed again. She herself made her breasts appear from behind the curtain, as if by accident. Let him look around and appreciate his good fortune. Selena wiped herself all over, applied scented oil to her body, and put on fresh linen. She had to put her jeans and blouse back on, since the way to her room was across the hall. What a blessing, she said when they got back to the room. Austin, what are you doing for dinner? Well, the interrogator stretched out. I usually eat a bun with kefir, and you, if you want, you can boil your own pasta. Or buckwheat. I've got a lot of stuff to choose from, don't be shy. Selena opened the bachelor's refrigerator. Not much. Chicken eggs, melted cheese, and in the freezer there was a chicken fillet. Pasha had a multi-cooker in his room, surprisingly clean. He probably didn't use it very often. Selena finally chopped the frozen fillet, fried it, then added water and boiled the pasta right in it. When the water evaporated, she cracked a chicken egg into it and tossed in some cheese slices. It was good. It's delicious, said Austin, eating the pasta with delight. It's delicious. You see, Austin, what one woman can do. Cook a meal and warm a bed. No, I'll go to a friend's place, the interrogator said embarrassedly. I have a friend living in the next room. He has a bunk bed. And you sleep. Don't be shy. Don't be silly, Selena said. I can see that this couch folds out. I can cook more than just pasta, you know. She hugged his arm and began rubbing his muscles. The cop appeared to be a trained, pleasant to hold, but Austin gently reached his hand out. Then she put her arm around his shoulders and tried to fondle him. No, he said. No, you don't. I can't do that. Am I ugly? Selena said indignantly. You don't like me. You do, Austin replied. It's just, I'm at work. Why don't you guys go to bed? I'll be right back." Embarrassed, he stalked out of his room. Yes, this was not how he had envisioned an evening in the company of this woman. But no, one must not give in to temptation, work first. In the evening, he had sent an urgent request to the insurance company and would soon receive a reply. He also requested the details of all the guests at the hotel with the poetic name. There was only one man and a girl. That's how Austin got the con man's new name. This crook would hardly wait long. Every new day was a risk for him. Walking towards the showers, Austin slammed himself on his pocket. He had forgotten his phone in the room. He thought it was no big deal, but he was wrong. Insurers are fat cats, Nicholas liked to tell his daughter Maria. If you only knew how much money they make from our fears. Fear of what? The girl asked. She was bright, of course, but not as bright as her father would have liked to think. On the fear of death, explained Nicholas. Loss, bankruptcy, but that's okay, baby. I'll pay them back for all the wrongs done to me. You'll see, they'll make a movie about me. Your daddy's a real hero. Daddy, why did you change your name? The girl asked. I told you it was a big secret, hissed the man, clearly losing patience. Please don't bring it up. Daddy's name is Nicholas, okay? His plan is on the home stretch. Now, all that's left to do is cash out. Some might say this scheme is crazy. It started with a standardized plan. Insure himself and his daughter for a tidy sum. All inclusive. Accident or natural disaster. Overseas or domestic maximum coverage. Then fake your own death. And your daughter's death, of course. The next thing was interesting. His wife knew nothing about his devious plan or his supposed death. What's more, she didn't even know about the insurance. All correspondence with the company after the accident was handled by Mickey's lawyer. And if the company had decided to contact the widow, everything would have fallen apart. But the con man knew that wouldn't happen. Even an experienced investigator wouldn't recognize this man as Nicholas, or Peter, for that matter. Instead of a thick head of hair, an unsightly bald spot. A ridiculous belly that's about to rip a button out of his shirt. Then there's the freckles, the blue eyes, the jutting jaw. Could you please come to the office? His employee politely asked him over the phone. Oh, Mickey replied, my client has no money at all. And my time, costs a lot of money. But we need a personal presence. The employee did not back down. I apologize, but I sent all the documents, the lawyer said. In addition, according to Article 28, Paragraph 1, and Nicholas began to recite from memory the legal provisions according to which communication with the insurer can be conducted remotely. That the client has a right to privacy, which is why he hired a lawyer. That you should respect other people's feelings. The employee on the other end of the line sighed, but kept her line. You see, said the girl, it is required by the security service. Look carefully, it's written in the contract. Mickey only smiled slyly. He had foreseen this scenario a long time ago. He'd been prepared for it for a long time. Well, the lawyer sighed. Let's do it this way. Next week, when I have a window between trials, I'll let you know. In advance, of course. But that kind of mistrust, of course, makes it impossible for me to speak favorably of your company from now on. Mickey's a highly sought-after lawyer, so it was up to the head of the benefits department to accommodate him. A very busy man. He was only able to visit the office on Wednesday, the third day after he and his daughter arrived in New York. You should see the way Mickey moves. He's got the walk of a winner, a master of life. The kind of man who can afford to look the way he wants to look. I don't have much time, the lawyer said together with a greeting as he entered the office. Have you done the paperwork yet? Yes, of course, the man replied. You realize how much money this is, even for our company. Ho ho ho, laughed Mickey. Tell me something about the big money. I know your whole company like the back of my hand. How you like to challenge even the tiniest payout in court? Yes, but try to get a word in edgewise with the insurer. I'm still surprised you didn't make my client swear on the Bible. The lawyer pressed him. The man had suffered such grief. Luckily, I did a legal review of the contract myself. There were no grounds for refusal. It's about a client, the department head said, as soon as his guest was silent for a second. She has to sign the documents herself. It's a security requirement. If you don't agree, go to court. There was silence. Mickey weighed the words of his interlocutor on his fingertips. Well, said the lawyer to the head of the benefits department, my client is depressed with grief. I don't know if she can come in person. Give me 1 minute, I'll call her. Without waiting for an answer, the lawyer went out into the corridor. From behind the door, the insurer could hear the lawyer explaining something emotionally to his interlocutor. His voice was beautiful and well practiced, so you wouldn't want to argue. 5 minutes later, the door opened again. I talked. It's just a formality, the insurance company representative said. All she has to do is sign and she'll get her money. Right away. Oh, there you go, stretched out Mickey. I talked the client into it. Yes, it's quite possible. But I'm begging you, please be considerate. A man has lost the most precious thing in his life, his husband, and his daughter, of course. And then there's this. Yes, yes, said the delighted insurer. Selena insists that the 100 million must be given in cash. Contact the bank and have them encash the amount in the largest denominations. But the warden was surprised. It's not a storage facility, actually. I insist, the lawyer said firmly. She wants to carry kilos of money, for God's sake. It's not your concern. And I will take the denial of this small request of an inconsolable widow as a personal insult. Let me know when you're ready. I've got to go. Mickey didn't even shake his hand, but walked toward the door with a victorious gait. Soon he would receive a tidy sum and head back to his hideout in the Czech Republic. Nicholas, alias Peter, alias Mickey, was sure that his plan was doomed to success. If only the con man could know how wrong he was. Using his powers of authority and a semi-secret assignment, Austin got the whole story. So, this Nicholas Peter wants to pull off a noble scam. He faked his own death, and to avert suspicion from himself and the death of his daughter. He took out an insurance policy so his wife wouldn't even know about it. He corresponded on behalf of the lawyer and made it look as if the inconsolable widow herself did not want to see anyone. What a hard worker, the interrogator said with delight. Yes, he deserves respect. I'm sure the scam wasn't the only one. Austin had received information about the conman's current data even earlier. As is customary for foreigners, they were sent to the local police department, and they're carefully placed in the database where they could be accessed by any employee if necessary. Austin was faced with a difficult choice. On the one hand, he had to inform his boss that a trivial 3-letter agency assignment had solved a serious crime. On the other hand, he could take all the credit for the tracker to someone else. No, that's not what he'll do. Like a hunter, he would rush fearlessly at his prey and throw it at the colonel's feet. You should be lucky, the interrogator said to the invisible interlocutor. After that sleepover, she never asked him for help again. Luck likes preparation, and I've been preparing for it for 10 years, no less. So he now knew the exact day and hour when the crook's accomplice would come for the money. Friday, 4:00 p.m., give or take. The interrogator decided to rent a car share for the day to go out. He didn't have his own car, of course. Park across the street at 2:00. And wait. To ambush him, Austin took a day off work. His boss looked at him with round eyes, but the interrogator was adamant. I apologize, Austin said, adjusting his glasses. But I've got a month's worth of time off. I'm only asking for 1 day. And what is it that you want to do so badly? For the first time in the years of their acquaintance, a slight smile ran across his face. Is it really a woman? You guessed it, said the interrogator. She came here, a woman from out of town. She asks me to take her to the historical center, to take her to the bridge. Well, you get the picture. All right, said the boss, but just one day, and to come to work as usual at 7:40. Is that clear? That's right, Austin replied. When he got to his room in the communal apartment, he couldn't calm down for a long time. He replayed the smallest details of his operation in his head, how he would take down the crook. From the back, of course, how he'd put the bracelets on him, load him into a car-share car. Of course, police regulations required at least 2 officers to both apprehend and escort criminals. But sometimes instructions could be ignored. Austin also longed for Selena. Why didn't I give her what she wanted yesterday? He thought. I'd basically wanted the same thing. However, as soon as he apprehends the crook and solves the most complicated crime alone, he is sure to get a promotion, and with it a raise in salary, a nice apartment and women. It is only necessary to be a little patient. With these thoughts, the policeman fell asleep and woke up only by the alarm clock. The interrogator could not wait. He immediately rented a car, not some budget Volkswagen Polo, but a luxury red Ford Mustang. It didn't have car share stickers on it, so it would attract a little less attention. Plus, this car had no rear doors, so the twisted criminal wouldn't be able to get away with it. Although the interrogator had originally planned to set up an ambush at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he decided not to delay. Already at 10 o'clock in the morning, his Ford was parked across the street from the office of the insurance company. He decided not to eat at all, but to drink water in small sips, so that his physiological needs would not become an obstacle to his triumph. Austin sat in the car and waited. It turns out that ambushes are very tiring. There were dozens and hundreds of people walking past him. It wasn't the busiest place, but New York was never empty. He watched them, trying to memorize details. The seat in the car was very comfortable, and even after 2 hours from the beginning of the ambush, neither his back nor his legs hurt. From time to time, the policeman started the engine and turned on the massage mode. Yeah, he thought, if I were to sit in an ambush, it would be in a vehicle like this. It's a dream. Well, soon he'll be able to afford a nice car too. Maybe he'll even have a driver in his new position. Not a personal driver, of course, but that's okay. So he could dial him and say, "Jack, 5 minutes." He was snapped out of his pleasant thoughts by a strange picture. No way. Austin, an interrogator with 8 years' experience, couldn't believe his eyes. Into the office of the insurance company walked Selena. She was looking around restlessly, and she also wore glasses. But having seen the face once, he would never forget this woman. It's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. What was she doing in the office? Austin got out of the car, ran across the road, and lurked at the side. He pretended to watch his smartphone, but he hadn't even unlocked the screen. It had been quite a while, 30 or 40 minutes, when a woman came out of the office. She was holding 2 large bags in her hands, and judging by the change in her gait, it was hard for her to walk. The interrogator followed her. There can be no doubt she took the money herself. How did he miss the widow? The triumph of her apprehension could hardly compare with the capture of the ringleader. The husband must have risen from the dead and persuaded his wife to help him. Well, we must act. The interrogator quickened his pace. "Selena," Austin said as he approached his ward. "Svetochka, where are you going?" The woman set down her bags and turned around. There was no worry, fear, or doubt on her face. Just a huge smile from ear to ear. Suddenly, Selena raised her hand so sharply that Austin didn't even have time to blink an eye, and the light went out for the inquirer. Selena now felt deceived twice. First, it turned out that her hubby wasn't dead, and then the interrogator, who looked like an ordinary nerd, was squeamish about her gorgeous body. She's still full of life. So Selena decided she had to do something on her own. Finding Peter was easy. All the information she needed was in the inquirer's cell phone. When he denied her sex and retreated, he'd forgotten it. Plus, his screen lock is a simple zipper. That's the first thing that popped into her head. In a separate file that was in the open apps, she found a notepad where her and her husband's details were written. Even the name of the hotel and the room. Getting past the desk clerk proved to be an easy task. She just walked forward toward the stairs and no one called out to her. It must not be customary to ask guests questions. When she got to the third floor, she was lucky again. Walking down the hallway was her husband. She ran up to him and slapped him in the face. Peter stood there like a thunderstruck man. It wasn't her who saw the dead man, it was him. He rubbed his cheek and remained silent. He hadn't changed a bit. He was still handsome. How could she not have noticed that wormhole in him? How could she have come up with such a plan? And all for what? For money? Well, Selena said, looking at her husband, "That's how you are with me. I've already buried you, and you're safe and sound." The man was confused. His eyes ran left and right down the corridor. "Let's move away," he said, and pulled her to the side. But the woman pulled away and pushed him away. "No." Selena was indignant. "I have to see her. To see my daughter. The one you took from me." "Svetoka," he said in a languid voice. "It's a very long, scary and fantastic story. I don't even know how to convince you to believe me. I'm guilty, yes guilty, but not in the way you might think." "I'm in no hurry," the woman replied. "Come on, tell me your fantastic story, before I call the police to put you in jail." "How did you find me?" he asked. Peter, Aka. Nicholas, Aka. Mickey couldn't understand what he'd done wrong. He knew that his ex-girlfriend had left Peter. He was convinced that they would never cross paths in this huge city. And Selena kept silent. She didn't want to tell him about the interrogator. "The insurance company called me," she blurted out. Peter's face twisted in a grimace of rage and fear. He turned pale and his lips turned blue. What did you tell them?" he asked in a whisper. "Nothing," the woman shrugged. "Said I'd be sure to get the money. I don't need it, you know." "Thank God," he exhaled. "You sure you didn't say anything?" "No," Selena replied, and decided to change the unpleasant subject. "So that's all you care about? What about my feelings?" Peter smiled. His face brightened, his lips red again, and his eyes. It seemed to her that they were filled with love again. He took her elbow in a gentle gesture. She couldn't find the strength to push him away. She wanted to burst into tears, but the woman pulled herself together. "Let's go outside," he asked. "Let's go for a walk, have some coffee." "No," Selena cut Selena off. "I have to go inside right now, to look at her." "Maria is asleep," Peter said. "Please listen to me. Did you know that I was thinking about you? For example, you sold the apartment. So you followed me." The woman was surprised. "Not sold, but mortgaged." "It doesn't matter," my husband said. "I mean, I was going to come out to you myself. In just a few days." When they went outside, they were immediately blown away by the cold St. Petersburg wind. It's no different here. They crossed the road and sat down in one of the coffee shops. "I don't understand one thing," Selena said. "What kind of husband are you to me, ex-husband or not? I'm officially a widow, by your grace." "Don't scold me," Peter asked. "You'll find out now." A little sooner than I expected, but... And he did tell her a story. As fantastic as Julienne's grandmother's story, but as Selena listened to her husband, she believed him more and more, and by the end of the story she doubted everything but Peter's honesty. Gradually, her eyes returned to normal. Some kind-hearted people brought him to the toilet of the cafe, where the interrogator washed his face for a long time. The pain was unbearable, but the cause was not a chemical burn. No, with Selena, his career rushed past him, and she'd blasted him in the face like a wild animal. But the problems didn't end there. Pulling out his cell phone, Austin saw a dozen missed calls. He couldn't hear the calls because he had set his smartphone to silent mode. They were dialed by the same person who signed his name simply as Chief. Had someone reported to the police that an unknown woman had sprayed tear gas in a police officer's face? "Hello," said the interrogator, trying to put a relaxed tone to his voice. "What's up, slacker?" roared the chief. "Have you had enough of your women?" "Not yet," replied Austin. "What happened?" "What's wrong?" The warden shrieked. "He's still asking." "To the department. To the department, quickly." The interrogator had no way of knowing where he was. He even had to turn on the navigator to figure it out. Yeah, right next to the insurance office. Someone must have seen it when that woman sprayed gas in his face and helped him to the bathroom. His eyes were still watering, so Austin didn't want to drive the rental car. He called a cab. The interrogator walked into the department, looking like he was going to the scaffold. What do I do? Deny it. He'll never admit he was trying to catch a con man. There's no report, no paperwork. It's all in his head. He'll write a detailed report that he decided to follow a suspicious woman and she sprayed him in the face. "Hello," Austin said innocently, walking into the supervisor's office. "You wanted to see me?" Surprisingly, the colonel was sitting modestly in his chair, and on the chair of the head sat some red-haired man, and not just sitting, but throwing his feet on the table, unheard of impertinence. "Showed up," said the warden. "Hero lover, you've had enough, haven't you? Look who's here for you." Austin looked at the red-haired man. He didn't look like a very nice man. A crumpled sweater, a shabby jacket, boots with huge soles. But since he not only took the chair of the chief, but also threw his feet on the table, the man is not easy. It was evident from the prickly eyes. "Hello," the little man said, removing his feet. "Hello," replied the interrogator. "With whom do I have that honor?" "It's Fox," said the warden, and turned off your pontoon cutter. "A fox?" Austin was surprised. It looked human. "That's my call sign," the man explained. "Does Fox have a name?" The interrogator insisted. "Names are not allowed for operatives," said the guest, standing up. "Oh, you screwed up, Captain. You screwed up." The colonel took out a handkerchief and began to wipe his face restlessly. Sweat was dripping from his forehead. So not only did they know about his shame, Austin must have violated something that made the three-letter office come to the house in person. And all alone. "I don't know what you're talking about," the interrogator shrugged. "I got the day off today. I'll do whatever I want." "Shut up," shouted the colonel. "Are you playing games here? You and I are no longer in the same boat. I've said it all. I've said it all. That this is amateur hour, from start to finish. You're no longer with us, Austin." "Am I fired?" Austin asked. He felt sick to his stomach. "Fired." Fox mocked him and strode toward the door. He grabbed the handle. "Did you think you'd get off that easy? Follow me quickly." I'm not going," the inquirer said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Go on, take care of yourself," the operative replied. "Yes, go." The chief put an end to his ambitions. "Go yourself, or I'll tell our people and they'll bring you out in bracelets. To be honest, I would have thrown you in the monkey house." It was only now that Austin realized the gravity of what was happening. It seems he's not just fired anymore. Would the policeman of yesterday now become a prisoner? Austin felt scared and sweaty. Selena took the interrogator down with ease. Her hand was being pulled by the gigantic sum of $1 million. Yeah, Peter's plan was good. How clever of him to set her up to suffer, grief-stricken, and so that no one would ever think that her emotions might not be real. What a scoundrel, thought Selena. I almost lost my mind. And still what a man. He rented her an apartment 2 blocks from the insurance office, and she had already met Maria. The girl said some strange things to her. She even looked at her with suspicion. Well, that's okay. The baby will get used to it. It's good that they're together again. Now she has money. And put it in the bank? I don't think you can carry that kind of money on board. It went like clockwork. Selena blurted out as she entered the apartment. Did you take it? Her husband asked seriously. Selena wanted to hug and caress him, but he gently pushed her away and took the bag of money in his hand. He weighed it, figuring out how much cash there was. How did you get there? Peter said. That's a heavy burden. Yeah, Selena replied. I'm exhausted. I thought I'd be right back. And there we'd be. What about the policeman? My husband asked. How did you get around him? Just like you said, the woman grinned. Pepper spray in the eyes. When he went for his face, I sprayed some more. And then some more. He's probably still waking up. Look, I'm such a criminal. Why don't we make this quick, honey? Yes, it's a serious article, Peter said thoughtfully, ignoring her words. He continued to admire the stacks of $5,000 bills. Assault on a police officer. Yes, with bodily harm. That's, real time. I've been waiting for you, Selena said. I'd had a lot of people asking for me, I knew you were alive. I took care of myself, But Peter's attention was consumed with money. He couldn't believe his scam had gone so easily. What remained was not the hardest part, but the time-consuming part, getting it all out of the country. He already had a plan. This time, he'd have to be honest. His tech company would buy nearly $100 million worth of luxury goods from the US, smuggle it out to Europe. Why aren't you talking, my love? Selena asked. I'm talking to you. I'm sorry, I got distracted, Peter smiled. I wanted to tell you what a great job you did. You did great, just like we discussed. I've been trying to talk you into it for half an hour, said the woman. I haven't had sex in over a year, and you're not even listening to me. Oh, I'm sorry, my husband replied, and something in his face changed. Take a shower, sweetie. I'll get everything ready. Let's not rush into anything. Selena glared. Of course, he might not be so capricious and take her as is. But a shower wouldn't hurt. She wanted to wash away the horror of the past months. Burying her own husband and daughter, she was on the verge of despair. Peter had rented a nice apartment. The bathroom was state-of-the-art. She opened the shower door and pressed the massage mode, and small streams of water immediately rushed into her from all sides. It felt good. Selena remembered washing herself in the communal room a couple days ago and hitting on that policeman. Oh my God, it was disgusting to think about. Was she about to fall into Peter's arms? She rubbed the shampoo on her body and imagined with pleasure how he would caress her. What a man! He'd arranged everything so well. Meanwhile, Peter counted the stacks of money and made sure every dollar was there. Well, he was lucky to have Selena. She was the most honest and decent woman he'd ever met. He'd liked it at first, but then he'd gotten annoyed. A man can't be that good 24/7. At first, he thought of just leaving. Sooner or later, the police would have her in custody. What do they have on him? Nicholas Crass has impeccable credentials. There'll be a real diplomatic scandal if he's detained. What's more, he's dead to everyone but this interrogator. But as far as Peter understood from his wife, this policeman was running the operation alone, without informing anyone. When he realizes he's been duped, he'll just throw the ends in the water. Selena struggled to get out of her thoughts and into the shower room. Not only was she clean now, but she smelled so exciting. Peter couldn't help himself. He knocked politely on the door. Oh, how gallant. Still the same. Come in, she called in a languid voice. Come in, my love, and rub my back. Peter took a step inside. He smiled and hid one hand behind his back. There must be a present in there. He stepped closer and held out a towel to her. Selena tossed it aside and showed her body in all its glory. She stroked her sides and hips erotically and tried to make a seductive movement. See how lucky you are to have a baby girl, she said playfully. Yes, he replied, very lucky. I don't know how you're holding back, Selena said. That's a lot of willpower. I thought you were going to grab me right away and carry me to our bed. Patience, the man said. Patience, dear. What are you hiding behind your back? The woman asked. Very interesting. There was silence. Her husband looked at her without taking his eyes off her. She had seen that look before. At times like this, Selena usually shook his hand and asked him, "What are you thinking about?" He never answered. Now the pause lingered. "Goodbye, my love," Peter said and removed his hand from behind his back. Celine's eyes widened with surprise and fear. She suddenly felt cold standing naked in front of the traitor. Fox drove like a real hooligan. He was driving an old Mercedes, which seemed to have a very powerful engine under the hood. The operative maneuvered through the rows, accelerated and braked sharply. He also kept looking at Austin and repeating, "You're in trouble, Captain. Oh, you're in trouble. You're a captain." The interrogator decided not to answer. The fear had passed, and now he had both the will and the desire to act. They wouldn't charge him with anything. After all, he hadn't violated anything. Getting fired was probably the worst thing that could happen, unless something terrible happened. "It's with me," Fox said as they entered a building with huge columns. The main office of the three-letter agency that everyone doesn't like to memorialize. The guard nodded and pressed a button, and the turnstile in front of Pavel turned green. "Go," the operative ordered. "Well, walk. Over there." He pointed to a dark corridor that ended in a metal door. Fox swiped his card, and the lock opened. Austin moved on. To both left and right were doors beyond number. As they walked down the corridor, the interrogator saw an interrogation room, just like in American movies. "What, interested?" smiled the operative. "Do you know him?" "First time I've ever seen it," lied the interrogator. "Well, talk, talk," Fox sneered. Behind the glass was Nicholas, aka Peter, aka Mickey, aka God knows who else. So the con man had been apprehended after all. The coroner was relieved. There were two men sitting in front of the con man, questioning him. Fox swiped his card, pressed a button, and could hear what was being said behind the glass. "Attempted murder," one of the investigators stretched out. Okay, he'd be running his scams like he always does. But no, he's getting wet. You're gonna be in jail for a long time, if you don't cooperate with us. "Murder?" Nicholas asked with a slight accent and a smile. "Do you think it's possible to kill with a stun gun?" "Yes, if you hit a wet body in the heart," blurted out the investigator. "You're such a bastard. It's good that this woman has a great health. She'll live." "I don't know what this is about," Nicholas yawned. "Wake me up when my lawyer gets here." The Fox pressed the button again, and the room fell silent. He moved on, and Austin had no choice but to follow. They reached the end of the hallway. There was a video intercom in front of the door. The operative pressed the button, and it was as if his face had changed to a more welcoming one. "I brought you, Comrade Colonel." There was a beep and the door opened. They went inside, walked past the reception area, where a pretty girl was sitting, only in a shirt with epaulettes. In the office sat a man with graying temples, curious eyes, and looked at his guest with interest. "Well," said the colonel, "the interrogator everyone's talking about. Have a seat, don't be shy. You almost ruined our operation. This is a major project, by the way." "Me?" the policeman interjected, picking out a chair. Talking to this big man was not like the execution he had so much dreaded. "I only wanted to apprehend a crook." "Imagine, so did we," said the big boss. "It turns out they wanted the same thing." "How did we step on each other's tails?" wondered Austin. "Agents don't sleep," the operative replied haughtily. "What, you thought you could outplay us, huh? We've had everything captured and intercepted for a long time." The colonel looked at his subordinate with disdain. He didn't seem to like the fact that he was speaking to the guest in such a tone. "Tell you what, Fox," said the warden. "Go on out the door. Go do your business, and we'll have a little chat." "Me?" The cop was surprised. "What's that?" "Get out," shouted the colonel, instantly losing patience. "Come on, argue with me, rookie. Leave us two alone, quick." Humiliated, Fox left the office. He looked at the policeman one last time with eyes full of hatred. The colonel rose from his leather chair and approached Austin, looked carefully into his eyes. The interrogator was embarrassed, took off his glasses, and began to wipe the glasses. "Brilliant work," he praised with a smile. "I mean it now, without irony. To solve such a crime in just 3 days." "It was an accident," said the inquirer. "Besides, I missed it. I understand Selena almost died because of me." "You missed it because you had neither the forces nor the means," the colonel said seriously. "Remember, every operation requires cover and support. One is not a warrior in the field. Is that clear to you?" "Yeah." "Can I ask you a question?" Austin said. "How did you find this Peter Nicholas? Where did he go wrong?" Still on women, the colonel grinned. "Our swindler began his affair with a certain Barbara, a hotel porter. Initially, he'd offered to play the role of ex-wife to her. And then the real Mrs. Selene got involved. That's your fault, Parade Captain. Such a valuable witness should be led to the end." "Soda, I understand," nodded the colonel. "There weren't enough forces and resources. That's why you should have taken the matter upstairs instead of playing the hero. So when Barbara saw her man with her ex, that's when her patience ran out. And we have a special relationship with hotels. You know, things happen in hotels. They owe us 1,000 times over. I couldn't believe it when I saw the picture. Mertz, my ass. So we played this blitz. And to me, "Is there a complaint against me?" the inquirer asked. "No," replied the warden. "It was I who asked Fox to deliver you. And he probably got scared. Maybe even showed his badge. Don't pay any attention to him. He's a competent officer, but he's not very discerning when it comes to achieving his goals. Sometimes I chose his call sign, by the way." "What about Selena?" the inquirer asked. "Did that scoundrel really want to kill her?" "Imagine that," the colonel said seriously. "He's very, very clever. A stun gun, you know, is not much of a weapon. Unreliable and cumbersome. But it can be used to kill. Of course, it would still have to be proved. Let the investigation work." "Well then," Austin said, getting up from his chair, "it was nice to meet you, of course, and to get off scot-free. But it's time for me to get back into my routine. Especially since I'm not getting fired and nothing terrible has happened." "What, you want to look for a criminal trail in trivial deaths again?" smiled the colonel. "I have a better idea, as they say. I have a vacancy in the department. Of course, we won't take it right away. You have to retrain, take exams. It's nothing personal, Captain, but after 8 years in the line, some people even forget the American alphabet." The interrogator glowed. This was the chance that comes once in 10 years. So he was right, and the case was indeed a winnable one. Austin adjusted his spectacles, straightened up. "But don't think that we have a resort here," the colonel continued. "People here don't see their wives for weeks at a time. There's plenty of work. Salary, well, better than yours, of course, but not a gold mine. You'd better think about it before you take it." "If I submit my documents tomorrow, will it be okay?" said the former interrogator. "Maybe you could give me the phone number of the head of the personnel department right away, so that I don't have to bother you unnecessarily." The colonel smiled and shook Austin's hand. "Well, as they say here, welcome to the force, son. By the way, what do you think of the call sign Cupid? You look a little like him, don't you think?"